what's really going on in the celebrity cloning and child abuse and trauma-based programming and the sacrificing, I stopped allowing certain people to use me and pretty much kept doing certain things that weren't okay, but were getting away with it because I was being nice. And so I literally gave that up. I gave up being nice, and as soon as I did that, other people moved in to more or less control the situation in the same type of way, but now it's through some other avenue online and all that stuff. And the timing was perfect. And what was going on is that I pretty much began to have these types of almost visionary style experiences, and I've been making videos a lot, and my energy was going real, real high. And it was, I even wrote a little bit about this at the first time, and it was for weeks, for the past 2 weeks. And I realize now, with the recent arguments, being lowly and angsty and bothered with materials and what am I going to do with stuff and figuring out stuff like that is gone like magic. And before I couldn't get it to go away. I kept getting this like tingly feeling all over my body, and either that or it's a brain tumor. And I was getting visions, and I'm still fasting, but I was fasting a bit, and it was really weird. But I realized it was exactly what goes on when you begin to break free from those mind control systems and entrainments, and that began because I kicked out the other energy vampire from my life. And as soon as I did that, 5 more moved in. And I'm going to record all this, and I'm going to present it to the public like I already have in the previous talk, and I'm going to continue forward, and I'm not going to let them touch my life, and the same thing is going to happen, and I'm going to end up floating out there to grass.
Okay. Well, something I wanted to touch upon was that you were talking about IV drips, and something I remember specifically was when I was taken to Dover Castle in the UK, and I was taken there summer solstice of 2016. Was it 2016 or 2015? It was, I think it was 2015. And I had to, I woke up, I came to, and I was in a makeshift hospital which was in the basement of the castle. And, they were having procedures performed for women who were about to give, a birth to a child. And I remember I was in first person point of view, and I looked over and I saw my arms, and I had IV of each arm. And the curtain was drawn, it was closed, and then the curtain all of a sudden opened, and there was a nurse. I remember her, she had this short, kind of a dark blonde hair. She was kind of portly. She had rosy cheeks. She was about in her early 40s, and she was complaining to herself or out loud about how long the other procedure was taken with the other patient. And because my IV drip had emptied out, so basically she said, she mumbled to herself regarding the physicians or the scientists or whoever that they were, but I heard her, and she said if only they knew how much this medication costs. And so she refilled the IV bag. Like I said, I had 2 in each arm, and I was out again. But it was like a psychedelic trip where I remember I gave birth to a child. Actually, I think it was 3, but one of them I remember specifically was a boy, and I nicknamed him for the facility he was born in, and I don't think he survived. I think he was consumed for the summer solstice. And that's one of the locations where they have those, and I don't hear it talked about a lot.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
And if you hear a little stress in my voice, it's because I'm pushing through the programming, because you're always taught not to talk about these things, and it's almost like you get choked up and you're forcing yourself to talk through this this program thing where your throat wants to close up and you don't want to say what these things were. But to go back to where I ended up in those kind of situations was because of who I was in a past, I guess you want to call it incarnation. There's no doubt. And it's hard for some to believe, but this is my experience that I was Eva Braun. Because I've been visited by SS, I've been visited by certain leaders, and before I was even fully awake, this was towards the beginning of 2012, I had an SS soldier come to me. He appeared in a dream, but he kind of materialized into reality, and he said to come with him because there was danger and I would not survive if any earth changes happened. And I said, where are we going? He said, South America. And he kind of projected this image into my mind of a bunker underneath, and he projected this image of traveling to South America. But then I saw snowy ice caps, and I was like, wait, what is that, Antarctica? He didn't answer me, but he said, we have to leave if you want to go. I said, I'm not going to leave my family. And in that projection, I saw all these soldiers and elites got trapped inside the bunkers and perished anyways. And I said, I'm not leaving. This is a trap. And he disappeared.
All right. A lot of information.
So I'm wondering where this all fits in. I know that they survived during the war. I mean, I have memories of traveling to Tibet as Eva Braun. I have memories of traveling to South America. And the last place I remember traveling to was to California. In 1954. And, I was in a UFO, and there were, men that had helmets on, and I was kind of like behind them on a booster seat, and the edge of the craft was pointed. The window panes were pointed, and I remember looking over, and for some reason I knew it was the Pacific Coast Highway, and I don't know anything about California, but for some reason at that time I knew, oh, that's the Pacific Coast Highway. And we kind of veered off to the left and where the ocean is, and we dove straight down to where there was a base. And I just remember this explosion, and that was it. And I think I saw my death.
It's a possibility. So, this is, if you have nothing more for the moment, this is often how memories are formatted and how the scenarios, and not scenarios because that kind of denotes or implies or even indicates a kind of simulation of experience. For what I feel and what I know, these are not simulated experiences, but this is the type of reason, these types of experiences are why there are simulations, which is to actually blur the lines between who everyone really is and what actually went on and how everything has played out from here.
Yeah.
I believe I told you before that with your first disclosure, which people have not heard before, and only one or two individuals actually have brought to the surface population in terms of disclosure in regarding to some of the genetic experiments in the craft that you described, that I remembered that, and I had the feeling that I knew who you were because I had been in some way shown. So I was briefed because of, I guess, what I'm good at, which is remembering certain things and handling my mind in a certain way, that I was briefed on the individuals in the projects and how an overview of how the factions and the, not necessarily the factions, but they tell you that too, but mainly how the operations in the projects are laid out and what is a simulation, what is a plan or an agenda. And the point is...
Right.
What was that?
I said, right.
Right. And the point is that even for the most people, even me, if for the first time when they just lay it all out and prove it and tell you, everyone just goes, no way, it's impossible, you cannot be doing this, it would change everything, it means this whole society is like a TV show or something, it's like we don't know anything on the surface, we're not really aware of what's going on. But that's the idea.
It is, though.
Well,
have you seen the Adjustment Bureau? I mean, those kind of things are all over, and they tell you. And I felt like my life was pre-planned for some reason.
Well, not only are our lives kind of pre-planned, it's that life in general in this realm is kind of pre-planned because of the way this reality functions. Time as we see it is a kind of operation that is time, it is relevant only inside this reality. From the outside, you have access to a multiplicity of simultaneous occurrences, and the way they operate, the way you see which one is the one that you are conscious of, is that you choose. We choose what's happening, and so in a way it's programmed in through a kind of spiritual, soul layer, consciousness layer interface. Just like computing and the internet and how there's multiple layers that work together behind the scenes to bring the graphical interface to the layer that the person interacts with. In this surface layer, we're interacting with the processes and the functions right outside or behind this layer. There is a management system where it's all actually being organized, and we think from this layer we're clicking on the mouse and it's putting a, clicking on a button and it's making a screen pop up. In actuality, there's a code and there are interactions between many programs that are using that code that are speaking to each other, and that's the actual function of what's happening. And so these projects are all deeply embedded in that view of what's going on behind the scene, and in that sense, all the functions and the technology that they utilize, it alters the underlying programming code of this reality by altering and controlling consciousness and genetics from a soul level, which is a whole bunch of very advanced technology and then very advanced spiritual knowledge, or kind of mystical knowledge in a way that it enables a person to know how to treat a consciousness or an individual and use words in a way like magic or spells and substances and situations to basically bring about certain results in reality that we wouldn't believe we have access to from the user level. It's like gaining administrative control. And so...
I'm sorry.
Well, you can go ahead.
Oh, something that you reminded me of was that I remember hearing that I was called the Keeper of the Keys, or the Archivist.
Usually these are memory implants to bring about certain archetypes that enable us to carry out certain roles. And we don't want to get too caught up in the programming. However, often the programming is not interlaced, because that's kind of heavy in terms of programming, because some of the processes are called neural interlacing, but it is,
right,
they're intertwined with our actual role in society, and everything is just falling and bouncing and making noise on my end. But and so what I was saying before is that oftentimes when a person begins to remember or understand what was going on, it is displayed in glimpses of lives that are interconnected through bases, technologies, secret operations, and ways that we basically don't understand at first. And so there's usually a lot of scenarios that involve, basically being in and out of consciousness, or operations that we don't remember requesting, or other lives.
Well, the majority of the operations that I'm in are out of body.
Yeah, well,
or are in clones. Sometimes it's a clone that happens to be a man, and I do cleanup jobs for certain special groups in the military elite. I remember doing that. I remember being an escort in a penthouse, which someone in the community, the truth community, let's say, was kind of pimping me out for $9,000 a night. And it was specifically with the Rockefeller family that he had connected with. So I'm saying these things, and I'm also a little bit reluctant to say them because I was just hospitalized twice in the past month with non-epileptic seizures that came out of the blue. I've had MRIs and CAT scans, and they can't explain why I had these incidents.
Yeah.
They said, it was probably heat stroke, this and that. But, I'm just tired of it. I really am.
Go ahead.
I just want to be free from this group that did not surrender after World War II.
Well, it's complicated. One, for the most part, you either are free in a way that is above and beyond the majority of the population, or we're all in this situation together, and when we all stand up for what we know to be right, then we're all free. And there really is no, I want to get away from this situation so I can go be happy. No offense, because you certainly deserve that, and we all do, especially those who have been involved in and been through types of things that people only know about from sci-fi movies. But this is a big situation that is civilization-wide, forwards and backwards through time, and it's about the salvation or the liberation, the mental, spiritual liberation of humanity. And so this is why it is all happening now. And as well, the main aspect of your freedom is through your mind and through knowing...
Go within, yes.
And through knowing what has happened is the beginning of that liberation, but that is also where most of the pain is sourced from. And this is also how the programming is applied, because if there is pain and trauma to get to that knowledge, that's going to delay the situation and basically maintain the control over a person as long as possible. And that is, I'm a good editor for the most part, nothing special, but many of my initial releases where the basically very first videos that I began to put out had to be trashed because I was going through what I observed, what I analyzed and identified as unconscious cues and subliminal, basically, tics and messaging, it's like when people, the celebrities, put up hand signs and do certain things like that, and oftentimes they're not actually thinking to do that, to let go of this message, to basically, there's certain words. Everything is mapped out, everything has a word. And for instance, in the bases, they don't go, oh, so-and-so, they made that thing with their hands and that. Yeah. Well, that's one version of it, and that's what we have out here. You can call another version of it, so there's a whole map and there's a whole language and way of describing it. But the idea is I had to cut out a lot of videos, and that's why some of them are all spliced together and like chopped up and strung together, and it's because I cut all those out, because they'll begin to basically activate those signals in other, people that are known as MK subjects. And so there's other, everyone goes through this. And so after a few weeks I got over it. I said I'm either gonna try until I sweat myself basically out of all my clothes, and I'll just wash my clothes and then try again with putting shirt on after shirt on. Or it's nothing. I'm just going to continue. I'm going to get over it, basically. Excuse me. And eventually, I did. And the point is that everyone goes through this. And again, people have been a little bit rash about how I know these things. So I was debriefed on how all of this works. And essentially, for instance, during my L&M, and I'm not trying to take the mic here, but for the L&M radio interview, and I don't like calling them interviews. I literally, at one point in the first interview I did, I only did 2 with them, I choked up at a certain point and my throat closed up. So,
well, I'm sure you can understand what happened to me when I was trying to talk just now, yeah.
Well, listen to this. I know that would happen, I knew before it did. I knew in 2010, years before. Because I sat down with you could call them an old mentor, and they showed me on a chart a digital readout of my vitals and an area on my body, and then they pointed at a location on that chart, and kind of like those LCD active dials where nothing's basically, it's just a flat screen, but it's all the computer parts are there, a dial and a readout and stuff, and he drew up a line, and apparently it put a beam out, and I heard the audio recording of that future interview where my throat closed up, and they closed up my throat from a distance. And so this is what they do to, in their minds, they're not doing anything wrong. They're empowering humanity to overcome the greatest challenge, which is death, by showing us that we, A, can be controlled through these artificial or technological means, but that our spirit, if we choose to overcome them, it is more powerful than all. Now, whether one wants to accept that or identify that as a program to get us to just accept this stuff, that's up to the individual, and I really don't hold to a certain outcome. But I know, except for the outcome, that A, you can overcome all of it if you simply focus and push with intention, and B, they have the capacity to control people. And so this was a military faction, because people lately have been getting on me for saying they, but there's thousands of theys, and they're all secret groups, and there's breakaway civilizations, inventors, ancient rulers, aka reincarnated ones, immortals, demigods, secret societies, so on and so forth.
Yep.
This day
there you
was
go. Exactly.
This day
That's
was
who they are, if you put it in a collective term.
Yeah. Well, they were just a military faction. So.
I mean, Himmler's around still, talking about Goebbels, he's around still, Hitler's around still. I mean, all these entities are around, but they're not in physicality.
They're tethered in an artificial dimension that is stabilized by a quantum computer system.
It's a pocket, a dimension, that's what I call it.
That's what they call it too.
Oh, okay.
A concentrated pocket of energy. And they store energy in these pockets and use them as experience reservoirs, basically.
I wanted to share a story with you, if that's okay.
No, go ahead. This is what we're really here for, or really supposed to be talking about.
July 5th.
Oh, hold on 1 second. I accidentally muted you. Okay.
Oh. Oops. It was July 15th into July 16th. My dog was killed by this a dog across the street, and it almost felt as if something overcame that other dog and attacked and killed my dog. And, which is tragic, it happened. And the night after it happened, I had this dream where I was taken into this astral pocket dimension where the elites have a lot of the meetings and these really horrific parties that they don't have here. And I was escorted by a woman with she kind of had a cat print suit. She was older, and late 40s, but she was kind of like a sex kitten type individual, And she said I was going to meet a very important person, so she took me up to this hotel room, and the walls were lined with wallpaper with silver, and on the bed was laid out the silver gown, and she told me to wear it. And when I went downstairs to go have dinner with this important person, Jacob Rothschild showed up. And it was him I had the dinner with, but this woman was still there. She was kind of like intermediary kind of thing, you know. And he commented on how well I spoke French. And it was just like, it seemed abnormally normal. But after the woman left and the dinner was over, we went into a ride. I think it was in a Rolls Royce or a Bentley, but we were in the back seat. There was wood paneling. There was almost like a cream color to the back of the seating. I'm trying to remember every detail as I possibly can. And he said to me quite simply, after a moment of silence, as he was being driven around in this car, he said, "You know, other worse things could happen." And I knew exactly what that meant regarding the death of my dog. My dog, he died in my arms, choking on his own blood, and with him saying that, my reply to him in that astral or wherever I was, pocket dimension, I said to him, "I'm not afraid of you. I'm sovereign." And boy, oh boy, his eyes began to throb, and they turned completely black. And I remember I was dropped off where the certain hotel was, and I told like a bellhop, "I have to go take a bath." And he said, "You're not supposed to go in there, ma'am." And I said, "I don't care." And I went into a bath that had crystals in it, and I felt like I had to cleanse myself because I was in this horrible person's presence. And after that happened, I woke up, so to speak.
Yeah. Usually things like that will happen a lot, and I can't really say too much, but there are many situations like this. We basically all have various experiences, and they're usually strange. You know, because of the nature of that, I can't really say too much. I will say one thing, that oftentimes something will happen that can be basically taken, it can be used to take advantage. Like, say something happens in one's life, and all they will do is say, you know, something's going to happen if you don't cooperate in a certain way, so on and so on. And so, while we think they're continually taking control and breaking all the laws and doing this, all they're using is advanced technology to see what is going to come, and then putting themselves in the proper position to benefit from that without actually doing anything. And it's like the largest scam you could possibly imagine, to the point where, you know, they can control an entire universe pretty much through doing this. And so beyond that, you know, you'll have to make what you will regarding that experience and other experiences, but oftentimes these experiences will be through cloned bodies, and more or less everyone is cloned at that point, and the facility that these occur at, or even aspects of societies, complete towns and literally towns, will be in remote areas that no one can access than through a consciousness transfer system, so they're entirely secure and entirely off the grid, if you will.
Yeah.
and even underground.
I agree. I absolutely agree that it didn't seem like I was in my usual body, and but it's like I'm transferred into it, which until you came around, I didn't really have an explanation or an understanding of it, but you know, like I didn't want to think almost that it was possible, but it is, and it's quite alarming, but I don't know where to go from here.
Well, I didn't want to believe it either. It happened throughout my childhood, and I received, which makes it sound like a gift, which it kind of is, what they call the awakening, which is where they unlock the memories. And the point is that usually kills the person if they're not strong enough, and for the most part, that's usually what happens anyway. And the body has to be transformed, whether that's assimilation, or a final cloning, or an immortalization, or eternalization, or however a person wants to look at that. You know, pick from the above or all of the above, because it's likely not just a simple one answer. But it is connected to the occurrence of humanity in this domain, because essentially the explanation we're given is not the complete answer.
Exactly. And I remember even future timelines where it was one of the offshoot timelines, which has probably collapsed since then, but I was part cyborg, part human, and I think we were called the Amazing Eight or the Great Eight, and it was 8 of us individuals that we were powered up partly by some sort of exotic energy, and the scientist that was presenting us to potential people who were interested in purchasing us, he said they're powered by blood glucose, and he said some other scientific term that I do not recall. And when I was so angry when I went to go attack them. All he did was like touch something, a button or something, or he touched something on the screen, and then I just collapsed like a marionette doll.
Right. There's a mind link sensor to the point where your ability to connect to that remote controlled body is disconnected. For instance, if you're actually not tethered to that body but being remotely projected there, then if they break down the system, which is often in the form of a chip, your connection to that body, then you can't be there. You can't control the body. Unless you basically have other capabilities, which we don't need to go into detail right now. But
but I saw myself kind of floating over the body and seeing how I was splayed out like a marionette doll, and it's quite unpleasant.
And that's your soul.
Right.
These are soul consciousness or soul transfer systems, which are the soul, the spirit, consciousness, the higher and lower. All of these are their own definitions, and as well. So I was in a location. I saw that. That was one of our shared experiences. And another aspect of this is that before, I want to say, I didn't know how to come out with this as far as the awakening. And that was 2010. I actually went to basically kind of just like die. Excuse me for anybody that saddens them. But that was 2010, and by 2016, I began to come back. And the main reason I decided to go public was because of Donald Marshall making a big stir about all of this. And a lot of people are feeling harshly about that situation because of his demeanor and attitude, but it's really not the focus of the situation. It's the fact of the information of what's going on. In the same sense, if people have a flat tire, they have a terrible attitude. If you were cloned over and over again and brutally murdered over and over again, people would not have an attitude. Honestly, a lot of people can't handle it more than a few times. There's a certain type of person that is required to survive that. And but the other aspect is that everything is mapped out. Everything there are dockets and files and contracts and so on and so forth. The term exotic energy or exotic fuel source is a specific terminology. It's a literal term defining a kind of fuel source that requires a complex or basically an extravagant manner of producing it, or it cannot be produced or resourced from the surface level Earth, meaning you either have to dig miles.
We were in outer space. That I guarantee we were in outer space in a contraption that looked like a bunch of capsules put together to look like the artificial tree of life.
Right. So these are so space is it's hard to understand from our perspective on Earth. Humans, more or less, cannot enter space without a very advanced technology. For instance, if a person just flung themselves high enough to enter outer space, they actually wouldn't exist out there. It would be like taking information on a hard drive and putting it on the table beside you. It doesn't work that way.
Well, what about traveling out of the body through outer space?
Exactly.
Because I have a memory of traveling through the sun, through the gate. At first, it looked like it was an hourglass, but then as I got closer and closer and closer, it turned into a circle. It was black, and then I went through it without any problem. And I was just going to see my grandma, wherever she was.
Right, so, before I get too behind, that's the basic. The exotic energy is either very, very deep or it's off the surface. And so space is a difficult concept to understand. However, the other aspect is that these experiences could be simulated experiences that they offer or download into a variety of individuals' minds that originated in an original person's experience, and that they're memory implants for some people. And there are entirely simulated experiences. These, I don't believe are, but there are some in that nature, and they were used as training scenarios or conditioning scenarios.
Yes, I agree.
I want to mention that the black eyes is related to an activation of a form of nanotech goo, which is an exotic system that was apparently developed in an alternate timeline, which links together organic timelines with an artificial timeline and extracts the information and the energy from the organic and feeds it into the artificial, literally like a kind of interdimensional blob organism that infects literal solar systems. Okay.
Seems like they didn't like talking about that, huh?
Somewhat. Well, so basically, everyone tends to have these infections, and those who are least compassionate and most autonomously controlled are literally infected to the max with nanites, and the nanites more or less control people like microorganic or organisms as a part of a hive mind control system. And when they get fully activated through hatred, that tends to happen, and their blood becomes fully black, and their eyes become black, and then it's kind of like a demon. It's not the same as what is known as demonic possession. This is an entirely different field, although they're similar in effect. And,
correct.
And so then, and this is all from experience, I've seen what happens when they inject a person with the whole vial. I've seen what happens when they inject operatives with vials of the stuff. I've seen... Basically, they described it to me because this is what's required to produce a viable, beneficial outcome for this. The system invaded Earth in earlier times and sent itself here in a remote control form through electromagnetics and hid in the magnetic field of the Moon and the Earth, and entered in through dropping out a kind of chunk which people thought was an asteroid from God because it gave crazy telepathy and control and power, and it releases pleasure and lust, basically like an orgasm, like dark orgasms. And so they began to worship it, and this is where some of the world religions come from. And it's basically a interdimensional...
Like the Kaba cube.
Some of this, yes. An interdimensional parasitic organism that is basically like an overlord. And so then the Tree of Life, if they can get the individuals to more or less align themselves in a way, basically properly, they can open up a portal to the organic timelines, and that's what they do to continually try and infest more and more timelines. And the sun is a major portal because it's a dimensional. It's a step down. What was it? A transceiver, and then there's another word for it that somebody reminded me of, and of course I forget it again. But it's basically a dimensional transceiver where it steps down energy from a higher dimension into one that we can see and touch physically, and so that means that our bodies will not go through there, but our souls can traverse through, and more so our spiritual sense, and it's basically an exit for this system. And as well, this is the energy that they tap to organize StarGate transfer systems where they create small suns that open up portals in space-time and allow them to move through different areas at faster than the speed of light. And,
but there's also a portal in Jupiter, and there's somewhere else I remember traveling to. I was on a military base off of a moon off of Saturn, and I saw Dick Cheney there. He wanted to do the alien invasion, but he wanted to use our guys, and he wanted to use these small biological robotic entities, and he wanted to kidnap some of our guys so that people could be riled up to go and attack them.
Right, because then it gives them the right to defend themselves. Which is, when people don't understand how this is working, basically it's confusing in a variety of those senses. But, so basically they're running the show. What we see is people kind of signing stuff and waving to the groups of the people, the crowds. Okay, what we are seeing is a show where what's going on behind the scenes is an entire control system that works on and off-world. And now to clarify, off-world for me doesn't exist. There is no such thing as space or aliens. These are interdimensional overlays of the current reality that are expanded through what are basically very powerful quantum extrapolation systems that generated what we call the solar system. And that's why that cube system, or these portal entrainment systems that activate and stabilize stargates that pulse in and basically entrain us to specific artificial timelines, they don't actually exist in the original organic existence or timeline. Meaning this whole system, this whole solar system, is a soul trap system, a solar system that is completely and wholly designed as a labyrinth for the souls that are originally from the true Earth, which is not original because that indicates a beginning, and the beginning indicates an end. But this is something that always was, and what is simply not original is the place that we're in now, which is an artificial overlay where we're more or less inside of a contraption, spiritually. And
I've heard it called the construct.
Yep, the construct, the matrix, the grid, there's all these words. It's basically the same. All these sayings. It's almost like in prison or something like that, where they have all these terms for getting hemmed up or up the road or the joint or the house, big house, whatever it is. It's literally the same thing where there's a slang. It's very strange. But
now I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a question for you. You said you were briefed on me, or briefed with information about me. Can I just pry into that a little bit out of curiosity?
Unfortunately, they gave me the awareness of everyone that I meet. Basically, the people in these... So, there's got to be a way to solve the situation, right? There's got to be something that can be done. So, alright, what's the solution, people? Come on, you're the best paid geniuses in the world. Not paid, but they have anything in They don't get paid, but say they want to do something or have something. All right, go take 2 weeks in the time dilation system and invite a bunch of women, or do whatever you want. Go skiing, but nobody want to ski if you can do whatever you want. I would. And so what they come up with, okay, we're all going to become superhumans, and we're going to become absolutely the most cosmically intelligent beings, and we're going to be able to do anything. So what they put me through is one aspect of the system is they take the consciousness and they convert or transfer the consciousness through that cloning system, which is all that's happening when we're in clones' bodies, is a supercomputer is calculating our personality and training it, basically making it's a mirror of the soul trap, and they invented that in order to overcome the soul trap. Everything that they did was to realize that there's somebody using a soul trap technology and a blank slate and all that to trap humanity, and they wanted to figure out how to overcome this. And at first, how to overcome it? Well, let's own it. If we can't if we can't escape, well, we're going to become the prison wardens, and we're gonna own it.
Can I interject here really quickly?
Sure. Yep.
This past week, I had an out-of-body experience where I was gone, quote-unquote, asleep for about 14 hours. But it seemed like I was gone for days or even weeks. But the thing was, I was completely out of body. I was not in a clone. I was flying about everywhere. I could see everything underneath me. And the thing was to find the master camera and the master projector. And we succeeded in that.
That's the whole show, is that they secretly figured out how to buy enough time to work with this construct to develop superhumans that can ultimately defeat it. Which, even mentioning that is frightening, but guess what? I've been playing around for long enough for people. This whole thing, the whole event, is to defeat the construct and free humanity finally. If it wasn't, you would all be memory wiped and in a bottomless pit by now with the big monster thing just playing with everybody's genitals and then eating them and then spitting them back out and doing it over and over again, and that's the abyss. That's all that happens. It's a time loop compressed. We're in a situation where we have time, we have the ability to choose where we're going to go, and that's literally our opportunity to make heaven on earth.
And I'm going to say something that I haven't shared with anybody. This mission involved having the green light to go after somebody quite nefarious and evil, who likes to frequent San Francisco and British Columbia, and he was being protected by the Nazis, and we got the green light to go after him and capture him. There was a lot of negotiations which took place.
Right, and so you don't have to mention anybody's name, more or less, that is not going to benefit this disclosure.
I won't.
This disclosure and the liberation of humanity, unless that's required. But that's basically the gist of the information, that there were negotiations and we were all involved. What they did for me, this is basically the unlocking, the awakening. I always get my versions of their versions of the words. And it makes them wonder why he does that. But excuse me. They connect through the clone, okay, and that's through a computer system that entrains the consciousness and basically grips the consciousness through an electromagnetic field, a soul magnet.
Yes.
And then it beams it through a resonance system, through a very powerful chip that could literally power not power, but it could control all the electronics you've ever used in your life. A little chip that goes in the brain can control all of them. They developed one that's so powerful.
But don't you have one close to your heart if you go through a gate and it could restart your heart, so to speak?
Right. I'm surprised you know that. We'll hold that off for 2 seconds here. But that's something nobody really knows. Everyone is outfitted with these biotech suits that all it means is they've had surgery. Like, where's your armor? Where's your this? It's not. We have nanotech. That's what it's all nano. It's all technology that goes within. There's only a few people that are smart enough to know about this, and unfortunately, most of them choose to not show their face because they have, careers or reputations or something like that. And of course, I'm the one out here just talking all the trash and getting, well, normally I'm talking about all the technology and the reality of the situation, and I'm getting all the trash talked about me, but I do appreciate the people that are here for the liberation of humanity.
Well, they destroyed all of my careers, and every time I tried to get a job or a relationship, something happens where, you know, I'm just not in that position. I'm let go for some weird reasons. It's technically, like, imprisoned in the 3D world as well as, you know, they just don't want me to thrive here. To keep me low energy, so to speak.
Right.
But I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm fighting as hard as I can.
It's all mental.
Yes.
And this world is an illusion, and that's the story from day one. So, the unlocking is, with all these superhumans, and these are just wealthy individuals, and they all have the tech. All these superhumans and so forth, if you're in the entrainment system or the machine, your mind is basically being projected through a virtual system that is beaming it into a chip that is in the brain of a clone body, and if the genetics are similar enough, then the consciousness of the individual will be able to fully interface through that chip into the body of the clone. Now, how does this work? It is not like a computer system where each of the commands and functions are being relayed. All it is a spiritual relay where your soul energy begins to vibrate forth and seep out of this chip, and then once enough of that gathers around the body, you click on in the body, and now you're aware inside the body through a remote tether. So,
but it feels really real. When I was in a battle, like hands-on, a battle against another blonde girl, we were told to fight to the death, and we had the knives, and I struck her, but then she struck me with this, a move caught me off completely. She inserted the blade up my private area, and then it was such a jarring experience that I woke up, and I could still feel the pain in my physicality.
Right. As Donald calls them, then this is what I unfortunately had the experience of witnessing and being informed that that's what they're called. And you can kind of come to these conclusions as well. They usually name things as they seem, that these are pain echoes. That if an experience is strong enough, it will literally seemingly reverberate back through space itself into your consciousness system in the organic form of your original body. And it will feel as if the perceptual system is still present, even though none of those nerve cells actually fired and none of those areas of your brain actually activated. And it's all through a spiritual system.
Your emotional body is connected when you're in the clone, correct? So you would feel that...
If you are capable of that. Some people are not capable. And they only have a bland, kind of like a puppet layer that comes through, and they don't remember anything, and they don't know what's going on, and they're very, very dry and more or less kind of evil when they're transferred through. To have...
robotic.
Yep, to have that presence means a person's form is more or less more fully stabilized in this reality. It's more developed, more mature. They're awake. And so then there are multiple layers of the body, which is, or the higher bodies, which is your mind, and one body contains the reference in time. If that is disturbed or disrupted, your reference to time changes. For instance, this can be used to localize or delocalize effects, meaning they can go 3 seconds ahead by altering an angle of relativity in the temporal body, and now at a certain time in the future there will be a pain introduced. Once that body catches up, or that effect, that ripple in that body catches up to the physical body, because it's literally like an outpouring or some decoding. It's strange. There's not really much to describe. It's like a waterfall of energy. And so if you go ahead in the waterfall, you can put something in the river, if you will, in a dimensional twist, which eventually it unfolds and comes to the surface, and that's the present moment. So they can
plasma liquid.
Well, these are everything outside physical that is described as a form of information that's connected to consciousness, meaning it's kind of aware information, is a liquid etheric substance, and this is related to plasma, and basically everything informational is actually plasma. If we could deem this world consciousness, or consciousness relative, and therefore connect consciousness to a type of internet, the internet is not Wi-Fi information in electromagnetic waves. It's a very, very dense plasma liquid, which is literally the ether of all of space-time. We're floating in it. We're communicating through it right now for us to be communicating. It's not our bodies making sense and spreading, sound language being transferred. That's the physical layer. The other layer is a coded system, and the human aspect of that, the consciousness, the actual spirit, is a liquid etheric form. And they use the information of the actual layer to develop all this technology. And
correct. And sometimes the human, the body does not have the DNA physical structure to contain all the information which is provided, and it seems to be floating up in the ether or in the aura around that person. But would you agree with that?
It's never all of it, because then we would just be we'd be rocks, and somebody would say, "Do you want
we would
food?"
short circuit some of
Right, there would be nothing here to do. Do you want to get food? I can make food. Do you want to go over there? I'm everywhere. Do you want to do anything? I'm doing all things now.
But that's what they're trying to look for in people with certain genes.
Those are epigenetics. And so the idea is that everything is contained outside the body, and only a small sliver is actually in the body, and it's because the soul cannot actually fit into the body. With the universe that we're in now, a dimensional overlay, you can only possibly get a small fragment of a soul into the body, and the first who awakens their soul cracks the construct and liberates the soul of humanity, which is currently in a sleeping state, trapped within an endless dream. And the idea is that the pain body is what they operate on in order to produce these effects that are basically etheric attachments, which are a form of programming and literally putting injuries into the body by beaming a form of symbolic energy, a geometry of electromagnetic information into that plasma body, and over time it manifests as an experience in the three-dimensional physical world. It draws in events to the timeline, and they, code that in, they script it in. So literally, there are certain words for all of this, and so then the operations, a lot of these operations are out of body, and they're literally plasmic interference patterns being uploaded or altered or downloaded from the field, which then influences the mind and controls that person's trajectory through time. And it changes events. It introduces physical effects simply by beaming energy. And they're actually interacting with the body, with the energetic body. And when large events are being done, it's literally called a astral operation, or there are other terms that I can't think of right now.
Did you read the entry I had regarding what was going on at Ground Zero after the attacks happened, like circa 2003, 2004? I wrote an article about that I saw, and I was a part of. Unfortunately, I had to witness where they were doing human sacrifice on those grounds, because there's a vortex there.
Right. I did, and you can say what you will from here on that if you wish to.
Well, the article's already out, and I had to say what I had to say, and I can't say I've come to peace with it, but I know that it's what they do to cause a lot of angst in this world. And the new tower that's up currently is actually a prism, and it inverts the light energy, and it's projected outwards, inverted.
Right. These basically are used to stabilize alterations in the collective mind, and in this way, symbolic areas, the megalithic structures, I can't think of the word, but basically the big structures they build in cities, I can't think of them right now. They're
those skyscrapers and the
monoliths, but as well, some buildings.
Cleopatra's Needle.
Well, these are actually like USB ports for computer systems that are constructed out of that etheric grid and anchored through 3D space. And they're actually a 3D space that's anchored through the grid. And this enables control. The whole goal is to lower the energy enough to keep the collective mind on a lower dimensional timeline where there are not as many access points to the higher dimensional timelines where something, say, a mass liberation occurs, or just a general happiness and people don't have such angst running through their system all the time. Literally a massive, thousands of years of these events, these rituals, it controls the collective mind. It alters the collective mind of the species and brings about specific responses that are desired for people who are geared towards ruling through dominance and more or less depravity. And ultimately, it's not so much about pleasure and having fun doing wrong. It's a AI hive mind control system from an interdimensional parasite that utilizes that to maintain humanity in a lower dimensional area, because this system cannot access the higher dimensional area, and if there are no observer agents in the lower dimensional area, it will literally dissolve and close out. Just like if if nobody in the world is aware of an area, technically that area begins to disappear from time-space. It's only tethered there by people's observation. And so the system knows
certain parts of Atlantis, I'm thinking, or certain other old ancient kingdoms.
Apparently all of them. And as well, though, this space, the atomic energy, electric energy, it acts like a magnetic recording tape from an extra-dimensional perspective, so you can bend electromagnetic energy and look into time, meaning everything that has happened is recorded. It's all accessible. And in that sense, it can all be brought back into the present moment, given the right amount of energy focused the right way. Apparently,
I'm sorry.
Apparently, all that has been gone can be brought back, but all the energy is being utilized towards feeding these control groups,
which they are dying because there's less and less energy to be provided to them.
Well, it's as simple.
You can't get the same energy out of the clone.
Right.
I remote viewed Disneyland in South Korea, and I saw that they were creating clones there, and that they were turning them into ground meat for those entities that lived underground to devour.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. It's basically, depravity is beyond the capacity to imagine. Most people are incapable of knowing the truth, and that's why we have this system now. Because if it's a very clever plan. This is how darkness works. The truth itself of what has been happening to people that people must know in order to be free from would also destroy them in knowing, at the way we are now, or at the way humanity is now. And so it's like a lose-lose situation. However, it's based upon it's based on consent. And it's because
the catch-22, 22 being a master architect number.
Well, yeah, that all these terms are they're hidden. They have hidden meanings, and
yeah.
And I did hear that before. That explanation. But it's possible if people want to work with it.
Am I talking from something I heard that I don't remember?
Well, possibly, but I can't really say right now. I'll speak more on that before we finish the call.
Okay. I just wanted to say one thing I know I wrote to you that the first time that I had heard you talk, I heard something, or I felt something turn on in my brain, and it was almost like this connection in my brain that went to this dot that began to blink red. And it had something to do with the future, and that's all I know.
That might be a tether point. Basically the same thing as an event in history being tethered through depravity. Well, in a way the opposite, an addition of information and the mental liberation and a clarification or unveiling of these responses, these experiences, and a returning of accountability could have the opposite effect of what those depraved stabilization points could. And as we begin to talk about these things, we are leading towards an alternate timeline.
You're breaking up.
As we talk about these things, we could be leading towards an alternate timeline where we are
time quake.
Well, those are what happens as a result of the distortions. That basically the way an earthquake knocks things over, a timequake knocks over less stabilized aspects of the timeline, and entire towns could disappear, or movies, or people, or events in history, or these are the changes that have been occurring. And but the waking up is it's basically we've been organized in this situation to begin to wake up.
You disappeared again. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I heard that your aspect disconnected, and it's funny because I'm not recording anything on the computer. Yeah, you're going in and out now, I think.
I can't hear you again.
Yeah, you went in and out. We can try to hang up and call back. It is up to you at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, the call's going in and out.
Has to be a mutual thing. Okay, I'll try again.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
See, it works whenever you call me. For some reason, I tried calling you and I couldn't. But can you reiterate what you were saying before?
This is an organized process that is leading people towards waking up. And in the same way people can be programmed to go to sleep, and events can be activated and tethered through rituals or symbols or people or memories to shut things down and introduce these dark forces, events can be organized towards waking up and liberating and introducing empowerment, self-empowerment, freedom, which is the corrupted word, freedom. But so oftentimes that's what's gone on. It was done for me, and it's most likely done for others through the same process. And so, in short, we're all connected. You said before, the Amazing Eight, that is a group that I probably won't share any other information on, because when the great unveiling happens and everyone is to know about these events, because a global with parentheses, system is activated where you can look up into the sky and put your hand out and then download from the internet if you wanted to, and everyone will know what everyone's secrets are, and the so-called elite will have nothing to hide. And of course, many will look at that and say, this is a mass assimilation program, what's happening? The truth is, that's what happens anyway. Once information becomes dense enough, that consciousness internet that we are already on now becomes Wi-Fi activated, and the internet is like 2 terabytes per second instead of dial-up or even 100 megabytes per second or 1,000 in a gigabyte. It becomes literally movies able to download in a second, and in that sense entire libraries. And so what happens when information enhances, you don't get movies, many books, you end up getting a 100% actual experience, in the sense of, I downloaded a movie, but it's not a movie, it's a lifetime's worth of information of basically an experience in this world.
I'm sorry if I said something I wasn't supposed to, but it was my personal experience that that I was sharing, and that's all I will say about that.
Yeah, with the 8, well, basically, I don't like to talk about anything that's ongoing, and that's semi-ongoing, but not really, because most of what we're capable of knowing is no longer ongoing, and they're entirely advanced past all of this, and apparently I was told the war has ended, everything is over, humanity is freed, but we're stuck in a temporal rift where we can't wake up and realize that, and it's like a replay that keeps going on.
Is it because the AI has gone crazy? The AI that's not our AI, but it came out from elsewhere, and that it's gone haywire, and it keeps repeating the same, let's say, terrorist attacks over and over again, and does it have anything to do with the Black Sun?
Right, you could say that as far as the changes in the computational structure. And as well, there are other aspects about what you said that will be touched on in the near future. Basically, there is a good version of everything that is dark that has been, for instance, it goes good, and then they take the good and the tree of life and this, the original knowledge of the ability to awaken and so on and so forth, and then they make dark versions where they invert the energy, where they
turn the Christ consciousness into something that's anti-Christiac.
Right. And so, but the idea is that from that, then we turn that back into something positive, or not positive, but, you know, in the sense beneficial. Which then, how could you turn that back into the negative? You can't, or they couldn't, or something else couldn't, because it's already been negative, and we turn that back into something beneficial. So there's no more possibility for it to fall again. Basically, it can fall once, but it can't fall again if it's risen.
But there has to be some elimination or something of ending the dualistic mentality and the binary mentality. It has to be trinary, because that's how our universe truly is, organically.
Right, and this is the human mind that is acting out in the angst of the memory of what has happened, even though there's no reason to truly do that if we are truly in control, which means that the problem never actually existed in the first place, and it's all an alternate dimensional dream that was projected into the minds of humanity, the collective mind, and we're actually in a timeline of a very large history where people can choose when to die and how to live, and they can make food come out of the air with their minds, and we're there right now, and we just can't seem to open our eyes wide enough to realize that. And we're basically inching our way there, but the collective mind, the masses, must let go of the trauma, because that's where the residual, basically the pain echoes. It's the same thing. We're in one large pain echo of the collective mind for having gone through however many hundreds of thousands of years of artificial time that we've been in this system. It's not, 40 years of awakening or 200 since 1800s and so on. We've been here for thousands upon thousands of years, and the wiping technology makes it possible to continuously replay, and that's why people are having trouble letting go. And as well, there are many aspects from the information that is required, the knowledge, to the desire and the intention to overcome. But ultimately, it means people are powering. The way it was described to me is that the systems were unplugged. They're all turned off. But because the systems,
including the crazy AI.
Well, they're all off. In other words, they're de-tethered. But
okay, I heard it couldn't have been turned. It couldn't be turned off for some reason or another.
It's impossible to turn it off. It's just like the parasite that people, because of the way these systems operate, they derive power from people, from the mind of people. And so the only way to deactivate it now is for people to stop feeding into these depraved, war-like, competition, dualized, body consciousness, disassociated, basically residual programming, because that's what's feeding the machine now. There are no longer grids, apparently. That's what I was told, and others say it too, and I was told that the soul trap system was destroyed and disabled. It's not alive, so you can't kill it. You can't kill something that's computational. You can deactivate it, and that it was deactivated. And so that people who pass on from the body in this state do not obtain what is called eternal life, but they go directly to the timeline where this whole situation is basically solved, or never happened in the first place, and it's kind of like a movie that people watched for a second, and it gave everybody nightmares, and there's really no actual threat. But in this situation, for those who make that happen here and now, in the bodies we have now, they convert all that energy into a system that more or less eternally tethers humanity to the permanent timeline, which fully nullifies what is known as the AI soul trap cube system that is seemingly present here. But the idea is that it's an echo.
The permanent timeline or the organic timeline? Aug.
The permanent timeline is essentially the organic timeline. It never began, so it can't end. It simply is what is. If it begins, that means it's going to end. And this is also what is related to the change of the ages. A parasitic system, this is how it was described, relies on leeching the energy in a finite format. It cannot produce its own energy. It's like a debt-based banking system, an economy. Technically, the more that works, the more debt increases. The more debt increases, the more the value increases, because the more money there is. The more that occurs, the more people must work in order to have the money that they need, which is the bare minimum. The more that happens, the more money is printed, and the value decreases further, and it has to end sometime. It's a finite system where you can either have resets every so many years, or eventually it has to stop one time or another. And the point is that either way, it must stop. So what it is a system of diminished returns, where the actions that are required to propagate the energy in a negative or inverted fashion, because they are based upon not organic principles, but actual actions by people in specific locations, where they're more or less manually, artificially pumping up that timeline, pumping up the neural net, the quantum field, to stabilize the artificial timeline, that eventually they're going to run out of elbow grease and they're going to run out of methods, because the organic, which is not, it does not require a limitation in order to stabilize itself, it simply is the power of all that is, and all that has been, and all that will be, and all that can be. You can't have more than that, because that's all that's all that's there. And so eventually it means that their ratio of required energy, just like an economy system, a debt-based system at least, will drop below the bare minimum of what's required to keep the timeline functioning. And so we're in this area now, we're in that phase. And we've experienced these collapses, and so the entirety of the system is to awaken us, to help us awaken the others, and have this mass event to show the truth. And there's going to be a little bit of a freak out, because it's exposing it's the three phases of the unveiling: the celebrity cloning, the corruption, and then the advanced technology and genetic engineering non-human entities, and then the cosmic intelligence, the timeline distortions, and the reality of the soul, and the origins of the universe. And so people are going to freak out at stage one. It's only going to continue from there until we begin to get a grip on it. But the idea is that this is happening because there were quantum collapses taking place, and some decided that the best thing to do is just destroy the universe. And so others decided that we're going to organize pathways of more or less liberation that allow the mind, the consciousness, to walk along these possibilities and find a way into a continuity where progression towards the higher dimensions, a return to wholeness, is possible. What happens if that is severed? You get a quantum collapse, and it's not like the building falls down or something weird happens. It's what you describe as a timequake, or an actual temporal collapse, but the timequake is just a signal that something like that is coming. It shakes, kind of destabilizes. But what that is, we're now, instead of closing the laptop and walking downstairs or doing this way, possibilities of what can happen run out, and it's like running off of down the steps, and then all of a sudden you go into the air, and there's no steps there, there's no walls, you're into like a void, and it's the mind does that, the consciousness does that, and that's basically the abyss, which is the swallowing of the beast, the individual, into the belly of the beast, and that's apparently what happened to a
second death.
Second death, that's the second death. The quantum temporal body is destroyed, and there's not even a thought left. It's not that the body died, but it means that there's nothing else. Yeah, that's the loss of identity, and so these, you have the concepts, and you know them, and I believe that talks about that aspect. And we do have to decode what is happening. I have a little list here of what I was mentioning that the pain body is where those echoes come through, and that is where also these multiple bodies have to be cleansed from etheric attachments, which are kind of like devices, etheric entities, which are essentially these discarnate parasitics related to what people have called demons or the Nephilim of the past, and then the emotional entanglements, which are basically trauma that relates to the mind and is imprinted through these subliminal programs. And so it's all about clearing those. And you mentioned a few more things, but we'll see how the rest of the conversation goes from here.
Were Nephilim Titans? Because I know there was a battle between the Titans and the gods of Olympus, and for some reason it keeps reverberating in me that that's something that shouldn't have happened.
Right, the basic, so it's either that they are the Titans, or that the Titans are the ones designed to fight the Nephilim. And so basically, from what I was informed, and what I was informed wasn't too far off from what I concluded, after reading and kind of guessing what it was, but I didn't have the whole picture until I was informed. Which is why it's basically a gift, even if I kind of lost, my natural
the gist of it.
well, you could say, and so somebody decided to basically the goal of the Fallen, which is a group that created the artificial timelines by developing a portal system to entrain the original tree of life, which is a kind of extra-dimensional natural construct, not really a construct, but an embodiment that's based upon energy that our mind interfaces with to have experiences in physicality, or what is actual physicality, not what we have here, which is very limited. It's kind of like if you come here, it means that we're all poisoned. Actual physicality is you could do whatever you want. You can grow as big as you want. Basically, you could be as powerful and as eternal as you want. There's no limitations.
Or you can be flying, colorful, undulating energy, as I like to travel sometimes.
Right. Which is, some would say, our soul form. And some say that's still a holographic overlay, and you're not fully out of the matrix until you're basically pure shining energy with no distinction of any part anywhere, but you're just all one powerful organism, basically like the sun. And,
I'm trying.
well, we're getting there. It's when we harmonize between the layers. I think, like I said with Ghislaine in the recent chat, that your organs, your physical body, your mind, your emotions, your temporal body, your spiritual body, your soul, all harmonize like a bunch of instruments, creating a symphony that then creates a in-tune overall effect and sound that then is who you are, instead of one and then the other, and they're all out of whack, because then that requires much energy, kind of like the wheels of a car that rotate at different speeds, and you kind of hear them squealing on the turns because they're out of alignment or something. Or the driver has to try extra hard to keep the wheel straight because it's constantly trying to veer off track. We're all supposed to be in alignment with ourselves and each other, and that keeps the boat, if you will, the ship, sailing smoothly. We've been in this very, very dangerously draining way of interacting in this world, and it's a farce. It has nothing to do with the way things actually are. But this Fallen, that they entered through this realm, through this portal system, and basically kidnapped humanity and brought them into an artificial dimension that they designed. And where they came from is something else for another conversation. But that's how it was described. And they designed beings, and their goal is to overthrow the throne of God, of the one true creator. Not the demigod, not the god, the archon, not the false overlord.
Not the angry, the vengeful god.
Exactly. The god of one true, the one true creation, and the loving aspect. And they know, they'll say, well, it's not possible, but we can trick ourselves, and we can trick you, and that feels real fun, because imagine that. Imagine if we didn't do anything. Well, we wouldn't have an entire planet to ourselves. And so it's very strange, but I don't have any blame energy or hate, because that just creates hate for my own heart. And it basically makes me turn into a monster if I want to hate everybody. And I did that before, and it doesn't work. It just turns.
It's no use in hate. One has to forgive because that's how the universe is. You have to. It's hard to explain, but hate only accomplishes destruction.
Yeah.
And there's something I wanted to mention that happened to me around January, where the Rothschilds again took me into this, I guess, pocket dimension, but I don't know what else to call it. And it was Ariane the Rothschild and her daughter were entertaining me, and they eventually drugged me to the point where they put me into this vat that was not vertical, it was horizontal, and it was rectangular in shape, elongated, and it was some gelatinous fluid inside. And to this day, I still don't know how I got out of it. Somebody must have, tried to help me. And I found this picture through these old sci-fi comics, and it looks exactly like it. And it's, I don't know, it's just quite interesting that there's some truth in these comics.
Well, you mentioned one of the movies or something, I can't remember what it was, the Adjustment Bureau, and so everything is put into the movies because that is a practice of more or less unveiling through the unconscious mind. And those, I have a soft disclosure category on the blog, and come to think of it, I'll probably make that one of the main clickable titles on the menu, because it's I was instructed not to go too deeply into that because then everything kind of looks like a show, but they're 100% based upon the actual events.
Yeah, I posted a picture if you wish to see it, about the containers that I was placed in.
I'll have to take a look. I'm actually bringing up your page now, so I'll see it.
Well, it's in the chat.
Oh. Great, now I don't see the chat button in this new Skype.
Oh,
okay.
It's okay, but
yeah.
It's
so, it's horror stories, and then I'd have to post a link, Marriage Made in Hell. And so what they're indicating there, the guy's kind of wearing like a flak jumper, kind of.
But it wasn't about the guy. He wasn't in the experience. It was solely talking about the container I was placed in. Looked exactly like that. It was square, elongated. I was telling people it looked like an elongated aquarium, but it had this gelatinous fluid inside that would freeze people or would paralyze people, and you couldn't talk, you couldn't do anything. It was like you couldn't cry out for help or anything.
Right.
And they were trying to take me off planet, and for some reason, somebody helped me out, or some group helped me out, and I was able to survive. And I know it sounds like science fiction, but it felt realer than this reality.
Right. And I was just outlining a little bit about how there's advanced technology used, and the face is slightly different, which is basically leading into these kind of ancient races which are more or less running the show. And then as well, one has to have permission on the soul level to extract someone from this system, which is actually a virtual matrix. And in that sense, for someone to be awakened, they have to either exhibit the strong desire or intention openly, at least openly enough, to be interpreted as an acceptance of being awoken and being shown the truth, or they can request it. Or the person has to, in the same sense, have a form of consent to extract people and put them in these situations. And Lisa Renee talks about some of this, and I was briefed on her material, is that there's a clause that is you could call it an actual constitution, although that's the most terrible version of it. By the way, there are 5 constitutions, and the first 2 or 3 have nothing to do with humanity. It's what we see publicly, there's nothing really actually going on in related to those. That's why everybody's like, oh, the Constitution is being trashed, blah, blah, blah. It never exists. It has no, they're not even using that. Look at the flag, look at the system, look at the 1913, 1933. It's a completely different law system. It has nothing to do. It's taken over. They're in distress. It was a covert coup d'etat. So there's no government as far as they're concerned. But they're telling people, and people are just worried about what kind of shoe's going to come out or who's going to call somebody a racist or something like that. And but the idea is that they have to have...
It's all a distraction.
But in that sense, there's something called a return to rightful owner, and that is a return to rightful owner clause. And one is always under contract in this realm in the sense of these operations, and so one can state, I'm activating the return to rightful owner clause, and therefore all my genetics must be released from these controlling factions and returned to an organic, healed state and placed back into my presence, basically, for the benefit of humanity and for the benefit of my spiritual development. And stating that is then the law. If somebody knows these are happening, they prove that they are aware and sentient, because if you hit somebody over the head with a hammer and you don't knock them out, say you hit them on their butt, and they just sit there and go, what's going on? And they just keep walking around in circles, and so instead of stopping this now, every few minutes they get hit in the back, he goes to make a bowl of cereal and smoke some cigarettes and ignore it. And meanwhile, the cereal is poisonous and the cigarettes are poisonous. Nowhere in line can that be interpreted as in any court system of the false court system, of any aspect of anything. That guy doesn't want you to hit him with the hammer. He's just... It can't be interpreted properly, mainly because we're also abusing ourselves, if people are also abusing themselves with these degrading actions, hurting others, if they're being, spreading fear and angst and hurting others, that is a clear consent to be hurt in the same way. So we're under contract when we do these things, and the only way to revoke those is to begin to introduce the respect that we would like to receive upon ourselves, and to to break and revoke the actions that we we give to others. I'm sorry, I'm like jumbling words here, but it's a very complicated system.
No, it's okay. Well, I rebuked, revoked, rescinded all oaths, all blood oaths that I may have taken in the past, in past lives. So now I'm tagged, that sort of thing. I revoked, rebuked, rescinded all of that because there were very dark ceremonies that happened in the Third Reich that I attended, which I had little control of. I was drugged by Dr. Brandt and Dr. Morell constantly, and so was Hitler. He was just a puppet. He was drugged from day and night, similar to Michael Jackson.
You could say something like that.
No, but I'm not defending him at all.
I wouldn't even say that.
I beg your pardon?
I wouldn't even say that or assume you were doing that. It's just being honest.
I'm sorry?
I wouldn't even say that you were defending anyone, but just being honest about the situation.
Oh, okay, yes.
I don't want to speak for you or anything, but,
No, I remember having a big black coat, a man's coat placed over me when I was going into a ceremony, and then coming out of the ceremony, I had to be held up and propped up to make it seem like as if I was walking. But I was almost out of body, and I could see it from overhead, and I was completely out of it, and I was put into this black car, late 1930s type car.
One of those Nazi mobiles. That's what I call
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and, I've gone through the gamut of crying about it, of feeling horrible about it, and I've come to the conclusion to forgive myself, and now I know better, and revoked, rebuked, rescinded all blood oaths, all contracts. The only thing that keeps me anchored and sort of hurt, and I'll be honest with you, is my daughter Angela, because of how she's been used to bring forth tyranny and all this horrific pain into this world. It's not her, she's the puppet. And I'm not sure if she's even alive anymore, if it's just her clone.
Well, it's a complicated situation. In the end, everybody is brought back because there's a higher level system and a presence that has the capacity to do that, but as well there has to be a full coming to spiritual attention, which is essentially seeing the pain that we give to others from both sides. And I want to reiterate that it is imperative, sorry, I slur my words when I get tired, it is imperative to rebuke and revoke and go through that process and continue, not every day like it's a song and now it's meaningless, but when you know something has slipped and something is crossed the line. You
mean it from the heart, yes.
Exactly, and to not make it artificial or superficial. But in that sense, if everyone's freed, and including these wealthy elite who have done, you could say, crimes against humanity, which I was told this is all part of what is called the Unveiling, and there will be a tribunal, and the tribunal has already occurred, and there were negotiations, and it was decided how this is going to play out, and that the truth must be unveiled. And
well, I know that a lot of things happen at the G20. Somebody wanted me to be there in a cloned body, and I fought really, really hard to say no.
Right. And those events are a little bit weird.
He was a former chancellor, let's just put it that way.
And those are basically programming scenarios, and a lot of it occurs, we don't know what happens on the above level because it's basically under the surface, or you could say there's a period where everybody claps, and in between the first clap and the last clap, everybody was transferred into an alternate dimension and had a 5-hour chat, and then they come back to their bodies in a split second. And things like that goes on. And so, of course, if you were some group trying to figure out what's going on, you'd never know unless you had some type of help from above, which is how the higher dimensional aspects work, where the highest dimension, the true act of the one true creator, the love, and the true civilization that is eternal and cannot be destroyed, which has been disrupted by these events, but disrupted enough for them to come back and assist us in fixing, and not fixing, but healing this situation, is in control. And so the idea is, what happens when we are at this point of liberation and there are crossroads now of how to go on from there? And so the idea is that if some of these individuals have been they've committed so many crimes against humanity, which is how it was termed to me and how it was all described, that if they are to go back and experience what is termed karma, that it would destroy them and dissolve their spiritual component until there was nothing left of them. And they wouldn't go to an abyss. They wouldn't go to an alternate dimension and be enslaved. They would literally
They wouldn't go to Tartarus or anything like that.
Right. And so, which is another like inside knowledge to know that.
Sorry.
No, it's not a bad thing at this point. It's just, that's something that people should know. They have these bases and they have escape plans, but that's the whole point. That everyone has to be accountable, and the part of this plan is to gather so much karma that by the time everyone is to be paid back, you would never feel how much, or they would never feel how much bad karma they have, because it would destroy them instantly. They won't have to actually pay for anything, but as well, they have nothing to look forward to, so they might as well do whatever it takes to stay here. And I don't want to have that happen, because I feel like that would be a loss for the universe in a way, and that, in truth, everything can be converted to a positive, and in that sense, if we did help these people to heal, which is not what they want, they tell me, F your healing, but it's not what it's about a liberation of humanity, that if they were basically it would never happen again. And others say, well, if they dissolve, it'll also never happen again. Guess what? But I just don't see the destruction being helpful in that sense. And but as well, if they were to see how many lives they changed in a painful manner, and were to come and live as a beneficial, harmonious civilization, that it would destroy them every day for the rest of eternity, which is also part of that curse, which is mentioned.
But this might be controversial in saying, but I think some can be rehabilitated because they were incarnated into it, and I was incarnated into it in my past life, and into this life. I remember my birth, which is not something everybody remembers. I think my soul was just placed into the body, but I think that certain people that are not too far gone, that have some glimmer of their soul left and humanity, can be rehabilitated. That's just how I feel.
It's funny. Were you finished?
Yes.
You're reminding me of aspects, and I have written about this, but these are some of the deeper aspects. So there were negotiations, and there was a tribunal held for this whole process, and it was determined how it would go on from there. So there will be laws of rehabilitation for those who will receive a genetic mark that will enable anyone in any time, in any place, to realize these were the individuals that tried to take over a timeline and destroy a universe. And there will be like a warning sign saying, watch out, rapist. And they won't be able to remove it in any way, in any shape, ever, in any form. And so then there is also a reprobate, something called the reprobate mind clause, whereas those who cannot resist the temptation to more or less, in blunt terms, molest, rape, and kill the innocent, will be deemed a kind of an individual that cannot be rehabilitated. And in that sense, there will be a type of segregation for...
But there are prison planets out there for people to rehabilitate and to earn trust, and eventually that they could be reintegrated into the general populace, so to speak.
Well, this is what I believe as well, but imagine that there are some who... you, of all people, know that there are some that will... it's not scoff at the idea, but put it this way, trying to heal them begins to kill them, and you're like, oh shit, well now what do we do? And so there's an aspect that it won't work, and that instead of killing them, there will be a form of segregation, and that will be maintained by these groups who are more or less from a higher dimension, who are here to help, and it will be through us that the operations continue, because it's illegal in the sense of a cosmic truth for another civilization to come back and fix someone else's civilization. It doesn't work that way. And in the end, and as I'm saying, not talking about extraterrestrials or these fake underground races that they invented, also known as aliens, I'm talking about ourselves.
Aliens from Atlantis. Or cryptos.
Exactly. They're other beings in human suits, or humans in other being suits, and they basically degraded themselves and became these fallen forms. Fallen is a genetic term, meaning their genetics can no longer hold the connection, the tether to the original timeline, and therefore they're de-tethered, they're fallen from the organic frequencies. And
Anshar. Anshar need us for loose.
And I don't want to go too deep into that, but look it up, people, and pay attention to the words she just said, that they're not what other words are that other people say. But the idea is that... now I lost what I was going to say.
Well, I'm sorry. I just want to say, do not try to telepathically communicate with Anshar or those inner Earth beings. They are taking loose like you would not believe, and they have the technology to do so. So once you connect with them, I would advise you to be careful.
Yeah, these are simply AI-controlled avatar systems that basically create the aspect of a DNA awakening and they falsify it through an imitation system which more or less convinces a person that they're awakening and tapping into a very deep cosmic source of information, which they are, but it's through a dominance-based system where the further they entangle their mind with the information and more or less the actual act of connecting to this scalar mind link, they're actually basically being assimilated by an external organism, which is kind of like a hive mind, spaghetti monster, tentacle parasite thing, which is, it has many names and many words, and it goes back to Yaldabaoth and all this stuff, and I'm not going to get into. I spoke a little bit with Eve Lorgan, but that's an old, forgotten interview that nobody reads anymore. But I also unveiled a lot of what is going on, and I talked about these things the first time I gave an interview, in the first videos and the first writings I ever made. I talked about all this and laid it all out, and I haven't strayed from that. And it's basically it's all a plan. What I forgot to say, or forgot before, is that the civilization is a future aspect, and so if you go back in time and tell yourself what you need to do to pass this test you're going to take tomorrow, what's going to happen eventually? Something will disrupt what you're doing, and if you don't go back and give yourself the ability to pass that test, what's going to happen to that person in that timeline? They're going to dissolve or disappear. And so the only law is that you cannot go back and change time in the sense of basically cheating. And
you create a new timeline.
Well, right, and the only thing that the people abusing the technology did is go back and cheat. And so that's where this time problem comes from. And the other aspect that I overlooked a little bit ago is that to say I want revenge and I am hateful and so on and so forth because of what's gone on, it might feel right at the time, and it's okay to feel that in a moment, in a semblance. But to stay there is a stagnation, and it's like saying to the universe, I would like a war, please suit me up for battle and let's have a bloodbath. But to say, I am at peace and I want healing and I intend for healing for all. For those,
I want to heal my enemies, yeah.
Then the universe says, okay, you're not, in that frequency, and eventually if all humanity did that, we'd literally melt the boundaries of this electromagnetic fence that we're in, which, by the way, is part of the system that supposedly has collapsed and is no longer a fence. It's kind of like, what's a really crappy fence? It's like chicken wire or something right now. It doesn't really work.
That's why there are holes that poke through it, and sometimes you can see the real aspects of it.
And by the way, to shout out to farmers, chicken wire is unreasonably strong. But but yeah, so we speak love to the universe, and it says, okay, well, have at it, enjoy.
One of the first things that I remembered when I was in this life, when I remembered that I was able to run, the first thing I remembered was not in Germany. I was inside this cavernous place in the southern hemisphere, and we were looking up, and the Fuhrer was to my right, and he had this trench coat on and his hat on. We were looking up at this gigantic glowing crystal, and these German scientists were beaming these laser beams at it, trying to destroy it or explode it, or have it explode, I mean. And it did not do anything. It repelled any type of energy beam at it. And I remember feeling heavily distressed that they were trying to do this, and I was terribly sad. Felt that this had a connection to Atlantis, and that they had found it, and I was so upset, but I didn't have a say. And that was the first piece of memory I had come to me.
So, I want to say a few things. So, I was informed of an event where what are known as a liberation system, a group of people for liberation, began appearing. And at a certain event, we just call them wealthy elite, gathered their computer systems, building-sized computers, which are actually computer systems, ascertained where in a dimensional overlay this liberation group was hiding out, because they can hide 3 seconds in the future, just like they can be a kick in the behind 3 seconds in the future. Well, as well, a person can be 3 seconds in the future, and they're right in front of you, but you can't see them because we're in the now. But say you were beginning to open up and kind of see into your mind and the more expansive view, you could see there's somebody right over there, and so it's part of the capabilities. And so they saw this occurring, and they gathered, and they said on their little devices, they have since, I think, the 1900s, iPhones. Video chat that nobody really actually used because it was just like a gimmick. But the phones, the little walkie-talkies, and the communication devices they've had for over 100 years. And now it's incredible that you can't even see the devices. But they all communicated real fast. What are we going to do? All right. Somebody said, I'm going ahead, we're going to do it. And so they gather up their technology, inform their operatives of what they're going to do, and all it is these higher-ups, and they have armies. They don't have a call boy. They don't have a bodyguard. They don't have a pipe swinger, a bouncer. They have armies. They have military forces that are superhuman, controlled people. And so they got them together, and they said, fire a concentrated radiant emission of energy, thanks to Tesla and beyond, at this group hiding out. What they told me is that this was a base in one of the mountains in one of the main cities in America, or it might have even been out of America. And they fired the beam.
I got the feeling it was close to South America, close to Antarctica.
Yeah, I think it was it was outside of America. And they fired a beam, and what they told me is that they lost communications with that outstation. And when they figured out what happened, everybody in that group, that facility, was dead. And the beam that they sent out was redirected exactly back at this facility that sent the beam out. And when they figure out somebody has done that, they realize they're not messing with a covert group that's trying to rape and kill. They didn't mess up. They found a group that's the most powerful of anyone because they didn't kill everyone. They didn't save the system, save the world, and ruin it. They didn't wake people up. They simply waited for somebody to attack them and realized they're standing within the law, within the cosmic truth, and that was permission to then go back and repel that attack and destroy the threat that was basically threatening them, that was attacking them. Which is, when you see that and you see somebody that doesn't cheat, they're not, basically breaking the cosmic law, they're not hurting people unless it's warranted, they know they're messing with people who are basically God willing, or more so loving beings, it's very distinct because you know when they're dealing with one or the other. And so this is what they told me was the beginning of the collapse, where they realized there was groups that had somehow began to merge with this area that had begun to process this liberation motion. And Patty is someone who talks about these things a lot.
I've told her about it. I've told her about the incident that happened. And she thinks it happened in Antarctica. That something was placed there to be hidden away from prying eyes.
Well, I was told she was involved.
That's hearsay.
With some of these. Well, I was told she was involved with some of these, and I've seen what her mind can do, and I'll just say it's a little bit more than me, and I've never seen somebody that can. I'm not, for instance, I don't have a problem with what I've seen, and everybody here is mad just because I mentioned this stuff. So at this point, those people are not doing what they could be doing if people are sitting here complaining and asking for more when we're not even in the original timeline. This is a prison hell realm. Stop, get up off your asses and stop complaining. And
right, so, she's extremely prone to attacks, and, they wouldn't attack just anybody, any old person who just was, who didn't have parts of the pieces, is what I want to say, is that we all have parts of the pieces. And instead of trying to point the finger at others, we should be coming together and comparing our experiences and things with which has happened to us, which is part of why I wanted to talk to you, to see if anything is relevant in that sort of sense.
Exactly. That is how things happen in a civil society. And I know civilization is when the Time Lords came back and civilized the non-sentient early humans that were proto-humans and didn't have sentient capacity. They civilized people. And now this is a civilization, which is kind of what you see lions doing when they're in a cage and they're being civilized to stand up and beg for a treat.
A domesticated.
Right, it's the same thing. But the idea is for the other version of that word, instead of throwing poop like monkeys, when I'm sure monkeys don't mind me saying that because they apparently like that. It's what they do in certain situations, which if you were in those situations, you'd probably do something similar. But we don't need to be doing that, because at least if a person is incorrect, well, then bring that to the table and show us what's right. To sit there and put everything in this big, dramatic sitcom wrestling match, showdown of feud.
For everybody to read and,
exactly, not behind the scenes, on a personal one-to-one, look, I'm worried about this, can you help, clarify my mind here and put this to rest? No, they're just having fun. Those are simulation programs that are people who are feeding the parasite, and I was informed, I will say, that gets a person a mark because it is like Candida, where you don't kick it out fully with toxins. If you're not toxins, but if you're using black walnut to kick out this candida and these fungals, okay, which is related to a spiritual aspect, if you have more bacteria and funguses or microbes that are non-beneficial, they can be activated through a parasitic dimensional discarnate entity, basically a ghost or demonic, which it's related to demonic, but there's a different word for demonic. It's not. There's multiple definitions that they throw around, and that's related to
a negative parasitic entity.
Right, and that's related to your biology, very, very deeply, your immune system, and your overall coalescence of frequencies, and if there's other entities that are in there, other microbes, okay, that's altering the frequency. But the idea
But what some people don't understand is that your immune system correlates also with your soul and your DNA.
With your soul, your spirit, your memory. So when it's literally your immune system has to be intact to dimensionally travel. One way to look at it is you go through no time through a dimensional field relative to why they have to be put into stasis. I'll go back to the future or the past of this conversation real quick. And their heart must be stopped. They must be put into a stasis capacity, a status, for these elite that don't have the capacity to travel through a spiritual means, because if they are awake and active during the StarGate travel or this kind of teleportation travel, it will separate their soul from their body, and the two are put in a frozen form where they can jump through, and then they're brought back to life instantly. And it's as if their heart stopped for the amount of time it takes to sneeze. And those computer systems that do that.
You have to be really cold and frozen almost, otherwise you will self-combust. That's what comes out on the other end.
A splatter. The energy that goes through is magnified. And so in the same sense, if a person is full of bacteria or so on, it is as if what will come back through is what happens to a banana after it rots, after 3 weeks or something like that, or a stew rotting and growing over with mold. Time dilates and energy increases and enhances in ways that are non-biologically rendered, but rendered through spirit, and so they lack the spiritual components, and these computer system nanotechnology implants must stabilize their transfer, their trajectory through time, through these portal systems. It's very interesting, and nobody would know that other than those, not even like, hey, this is why you should listen. I'm not even saying that. It's just this is very high-level information, and there's only a couple people that had even be able to talk about this, and unfortunately, they don't want to come to the surface and talk about this yet at this point. But as well,
I've gone through a few, and I'm just at a point where I just have to say this because my soul is just like it's like coming out, and I can't help it. That's why I was like, I need to talk, please.
Yeah, this stuff is supposed to be talked about, because we're not endangering anything or anyone or putting anything on the line that's going to start a battle that we don't need right now. This is simply
Right.
showing people
I
what is going on.
I remember specifically being put through one located in Russia. And let me tell you, this whole political thing between the animosity and all that, but they worked together at the top.
Always.
But I saw something interesting. I was shown that Putin was ruler of a planet, and that he had a smaller planetoid, and that he had a fleet. This was apart from what I hate saying this term, but the SSP, whatever, had agreed to. Like, he had his own.
They all do, more or less. It's a requirement. If you didn't, or if a person rose to power and didn't, they'd get taken out and replaced instantly.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to be the big dog, you know, how the Rothschilds own the planet Mars, so to speak, kind of, technically on paper. But I mean, I was surprised to see that Putin had his own planet, and he's not all that of an angel or of a savior. He has a dark side to him. I think he's split into altars. I've been in a circle, and I've seen him eat the back of the heads of fetuses, and that's not something people like to talk about, but it's something I saw.
Okay. And there's a lot that could be said, but this goes into a little bit of political territory.
No, great, but I'm just talking about perception as a whole. And before this G20 group, I just want to go back to something that I forgot to mention. I had this dream, and in this dream I was offered to be the Empress of Antarctica. If only I would oblige to return back to the Fourth Reich, what have you. Because they apparently had somebody who self-proclaimed himself as the Emperor of Neuschwabenland.
Right.
I don't know if you could verify that or not, or if it's an inserted thing.
I've heard
because
something.
I question everything. I really do try to.
I've heard something, but right now it's about as clear as a far-off dream. And a lot of these events have been getting like that, and I was informed that around this time, closer to 2020, the timelines are going to be altering, healing to the point where these events that are the foundation for what went wrong and have driven us through motivation to come to the public and unveil the corruption, these events are actually disappearing from time, that they're being more or less erased and de-tethered from the timeline. And this is also a big deal, literally a big deal, if the people want to stay, then they can stay on Earth and rape and molest. And then the organic timeline's coming back. But those timelines...
But there are higher planes of Earth where it's not that controlled.
They're seeded from the physical, and so they can stay on Earth, and they can continue to do all of that. But the organic and all the souled human beings, meaning the true living humanity from this actual system, which is where they get their energy from. They don't get it from just any system. They have to have the life force. That they're going to be tethered to the organic timeline, and therefore those events, imagine taking a line segment out of a timeline and just letting it fling off into space, and let it just fly off into outer space. And that's what's going to happen, and that will basically, if they want to stay on those timelines, they will literally go into the abyss, and they can stay there for all eternity in a virtual world environment where it's just them and a few chimera-type pseudo-human forms, and they can have their fun forever. But none of them would want that. It would literally be like you're on a ship and they're saying, we're going back to shore. And they're saying, well, I want to stay out here in no man's land where there's no law outside of jurisdiction. And they say, okay, get on that dinghy, and now we're going to push you out to sea, and then we're going back to shore. That's your options. You make a choice. You're either coming with us or you're going out there. Bye. And that's what's going on. And but the point is, on the organic timeline, they're just like everyone else. They don't have any technology. They don't have any supreme power to rule over everyone. They don't have any secrets.
That's why they say amongst themselves it's better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven, and I've heard that so many times.
Right, and it's really not, because they can enjoy it too, and there is actually healing. I was shown the Ascension devices and the abilities, the systems that can etherically remove the trauma and remove the attachments and repair the DNA.
And the parasites, the decontamination sensors.
Right, and it repairs the DNA, which is more or less how these parasites operate by enabling these time loops through the temporal field, the blank slate technology, where a person cannot unify themselves and back into a whole being. And it literally stitches a person's temporal, physical, mental, emotional bodies back together until they're one complete spiritual form that has access to all of time. And,
it's all about frequency.
It's all
harmonics.
It not? These are all scalar harmonics. The DNA was described and shown on a chart as a wave, basically a colorful wavelength. It looks like how music is recorded. And they were like, this is how DNA actually works. It looks, you don't go in and splice things and change this. You get something that can sonically reverberate in a frequency that will match the frequency of what you're trying to change, and you entangle them in a combined field, a scalar a carrier field, and then you alter the field, and it will alter the DNA. And it's basically beaming energy in and changing the form. And so there's abilities to heal all of it. Everything can be healed. Not only can, like some others have said, Mr. Kramer, that there's a holographic construct is emitted into your cells, and then it reverberates back and creates a growth pattern, a cell growth blueprint, or what is it called, a stem cell foundation, and it can literally regrow a limb or anything like that. But you can regrow your timeline and regrow your DNA to connect you back to the organic whole version of the self where there's no problems. And so the point is that they can heal, and all they have to do is more or less, as they are now, overcome the ego, the problem of saying we don't want to give up our power. The truth is, they could have more power, having a good time, and it's not. They're not making the choices now, and it's absolute dissolution.
No, it's the parasites that are making the choices for them.
Same as an addiction or a depraved person or a person who has a very high level of trauma that splits their mind, and they're now
That's why they drink adrenochrome.
Right, and it's not, the person that does that is not basically making the decisions, and that's a very touchy subject, borderline. I'm kind of like losing my words here, but it's what it is.
I'm sorry, is it touchy for you? Is it like triggering in something, or would you rather not talk about it?
No, I'm just for some reason losing the ability to define, and as well, you could say, going through this with these individuals, they don't like people talking about how it's so hard for them to heal and admit what's wrong, and how from generation to generation these bloodline elite were more or less brought into these rituals and these molestation, sacrifice, so on and so forth, to shape their mind for thousands of years, and that they've been basically entrained to feel this way and conditioned, and it's painful to go back towards healing. But the idea I'm trying to present here is that it's just like an alcoholic or somebody who has a very downward streak or spiral emotionally, that it's painful for them to come to their terms with the situation and release it. It's kind of like the show Interventions, which all these shows are often scripted and things like that, but where the people don't want to listen to their family, who is telling them, you have to help yourself and you have to let us help you, because you're not happy. Nobody would be happy doing what you're doing. A friggin' robot wouldn't be happy doing what you're doing. And
you're not only killing yourself, you're killing us too, because it's a very parasitic thing that takes over when an addiction comes into play.
Exactly.
You know it.
And that is... Go ahead.
No, that's also part of the programming, that if you begin to remember, they'll insert some sort of addiction, which is a slow kill, or sometimes it could be a quick kill, but it's all a part of it, and it helps with the money that they transport through the CIA for the secret space program, and all that goes into the black budget. So it's a big trail.
Right. It's basically a spiritual system where the addiction is the way the programming or the parasitic system feeds on the mind of the person and assimilates their desires, converting the intentions of the individual into a new version of themselves, which is largely artificial, and this works through memories and inserted frequencies, or inserted memories and projected frequencies as well, which modify the consciousness as in the terms of a holographic projection system. And as well, what I was detecting, I believe, is that we're actually maxing out the viewers who are listening to this, because I kind of get certain feelings like that. But one thing I also wanted to say is that in relation to the de-tethering and the deal, or the liberation and the negotiations, is that some races feel they have no choice because they've been born. Well, first, the universe is a living being. The actual universe, it's a living being. It's not a thing. It's not an airy, spacey thing. It's not hard and cold. It's not soft and, like fleshy. It's a living being, and it's a cosmic organism. And so, in the overlay that we're in now, the source of some races is from a technological system that is designed to mix spirit or soul with the body, which is a created version through genetic assimilation of multiple species. Basically, imitation humans, if you will, factory farmed humans. And so they're essentially born out of the alternate universe, and that's a big issue because then, in their mind, if they leave the alternate universe, or if that universe is canceled because they gave up and they lost.
The dead universe, they came from the Metatronic universe, I believe?
Yes, the fallen timeline, and the Metatronic represents the angular geometric patterns that are utilized to entrain the consciousness into a degradation format that allows a parasite to feed. It's kind of like introducing a broken algorithm, or it's not really an algorithm at that point, technically it is, to a CPU chip in a car so that it runs very, very, I believe it would be maybe rich. And at that point, it's wasting a lot of fuel, and there's a lot of energy spewing everywhere. And people do that, and now our energy system is bleeding out life energy that these parasites can feed on. But ultimately, we have to have these resets, and as well, the universe itself, because that creates the system like a parasitic debt-based economy. It slowly shrinks every time there is a reset, until eventually there's a point where it can no longer exist. It's a fallen system. And but the point is that in the reality, in the true reality, and reality is a term for simulation if you put the words together, right? So it's actually, there's no words for what actually is there, but in maybe the creation or the actual universe, there is the capacity to give new life, and this is what is mentioned as far as the rebirth of the ancient times, the ancient scriptures, the dissolving of all bonds and bondage and the contractual agreements to the false system, and this relates to the Strawman and the absolution, maybe I think that's the wrong word there, the abolishment maybe, of the false legal system, which is actually a covert, and in that way honestly it's overt by now, cover for what is actually a spiritual enslavement system that is brought forth from an alternate dimension where there is a militant version of this civilization, aka Civilization 1, depending on how you look at it, or maybe it's 7, where it's a bottom of the rung and it is a full-on prison planet. People cannot leave a certain area because if you do, or if a person does, very quickly interdimensional reptiloid or insectoid beings will see that there's an unprotected human roaming around out there. They'll go and snatch that person up and then assimilate their genetics into their hive mind and begin creating an aspect of a human army based upon that person's genetic. Basically, it's
or cloaked, shadowy creatures.
Well, that's what these shadow operatives are, or the shadow agents. And
no, but they are almost like druidic in a way, and I even met this old man druid close to, what's that place, Stonehenge, and he called himself the Keeper of Time.
Yeah. Which is a programmed archetypical role.
Yeah.
Which is literally, the person probably has access to a lot of strange memories. And basically they have access to interdimensional timelines. But those operatives are interdimensionals.
Yes, he came from another time. He came from, I believe, Greenland or Iceland.
Yeah. I was told something strange. I was told Belgium is, it doesn't exist.
Oh,
I was told there's no such thing as Belgium. That as soon as a person decides to go on a flight that leaves there, it pops up on a radar of a computer system that's watching interdimensional and earthly systems, and as the plane crosses over the so-called Belgium boundary, they wipe everybody's memory and insert the memories of a 2-week vacation or whatever it is, and then when they are basically leaving back out, I'm not sure if they teleport them forward in time or how that works, but or if they land them somewhere. This is just what they were told, so bear with me, people. And then they send them home with the memories of whatever they were supposed to have, and apparently this was a project, a hobby, to see how well they could create simulated environments and pass that off, and then use that simulated environment to control the rest of the program. And as of now, they develop it through quantum computing, but before that, you could use something like that, and now you have a world that you can create any type of experience because you're inserting them into the people's memories, and there's actually no limit because there's no foundation for it in actual reality. It's occurring in a computer system.
Just like when you go on a Disneyland cruise with your kids, some terrible things happen, but you get programmed and blank slated to think you had the greatest time on that cruise. I won't go into detail, but I'm sure you can put the pieces together.
Right, and just check out the timeline, maybe the online Facebook one, and you'll see people who will talk about this. Basically, Michael Kavanaugh, and basically go from there, and everybody will see how these systems work. Yeah, and then the shadow operatives things is it's strange that everybody's here under contract. It's literally on file who's from where, what timeline, what frequency overlay or dimensional overlay, meaning there are parallel realities. It's all scripted, it's all written down. There are documents somewhere in an underground base that describe who's from where and what's going on. And there's technology that enables instantaneous travel all over the civilized, aka controlled world. And it's a big system, but I'm not going to go further than that at this moment, although the dissolution of the Strawman in these contracts is what is referred to as the rebirth of humanity in the ancient texts, where the final blow to Satan and what is basically the AI control system is that the heaven and the Earth will be destroyed, and a new heaven and a new Earth, aka a new timeline, will be reunited with, where none of this actually ever occurred. And it's actually the collapse of the Strawman system, because when that happens, they have no longer a cosmic right to be here, and in that sense, they must relinquish all the free will, or all the power, back to the people, and the people have power naturally to create universes through their mind. That's what thoughts are.
Yes. And, absolutely. Co-creators and creators among the universe. But will we, as the ground crew, so to speak, will we have the ability to recall? Yes.
Apparently some will. The whole point is to be able to recall without being overwhelmed, because if we all forget, chances are we won't learn.
It could happen again.
Right. And if everyone remembers, then it's the same effect. It's going to be traumatizing. And as well, you can try all you want. A lot of people can't see what's going on now, so they're not going to know then all of a sudden. They will, however, be able to see the documentaries in terms of literally tapping into a life experience and having it play and fast forward and getting the picture of what's going on, but they won't
That's why I took the ground crew. I guess people like you or like I.
Right, and it's about...
Without sounding egotistical in any way, but...
Well, if that's egotistical for talking about our experiences and elitist, then saying that we can't talk about these...
I'm trying to tiptoe around any political corruptness. People who may be easily offended.
Well, the more we do that, the more they're going to get their asses handed to them when all of this comes out, and I might be responsible for someone's disillusion into time if I don't prepare people properly, because those who have the capacity to heal now and face the darkest of secrets and the truth of these interdimensional parasites running Earth like a factory farm are those who are going to pass through this transformation period and retain their personality, their memory, their identity. And so there are those who have the second death, which we are trying to abolish so that does not happen to anyone, and so we can just make it so that everything continues forever, but not that which is bound to die, which is a destructive system, and there's nothing but life. And in a sense, this is also where people are born again, not only from this legal system, which, by the way, has already been abolished. They have no legal right to own the system because the contracts were not between man and man or woman. It was literally between star race of these interdimensional future operatives that came back and said, here's the secrets of reality, now rule over Earth, because we're basically from an alternate dimension where we get to rule over Earth because we created the idea. The idea is how, I'm sorry I'm rambling here, but if you have instantaneous time travel technology, what do you do to cheat and do the worst of the worst that I would never do? But if you wanted to,
you go back to ancient Sumer and you write up fake tablets for people to later discover.
So how do you first do that? Do you go to the future and say, hey, come back and do this? All you do is say, in 1,000 years, let's go back and make ourselves kings. And all of a sudden, poop, poop, and you have gold gloves and your gold-lined floor all of a sudden. You just create the thought and it instantaneously occurs because there's a natural trajectory that, or it's actually artificial, technological, limited, but it basically comes by just simply imagining it. So in that sense, if they said, we shouldn't do this shouldn't happen, boom, the timeline is healed again. So, but it had to go in and be corrected externally because they didn't want to do that. And the idea is that as well, these contracts being broken, Karen McDonald, Karen Ann Lusick, Lusick, McDonald.
Yes, I know her.
This was all described to me, and I was briefed on her information, and I was debriefed with her in front of her, and she basically somehow figured out all of this, and because she stepped up to the plate and her genetics are basically capable of accessing this information, that means that she's basically you could call a proprietor of the new, not the new world. It's very hard to describe these things, but the salvation or liberation not program. I can't really describe it. She knows the contracts. She abolished them. She knows how to speak the real language, not the broken language. She that happening. Her going, let me do this. Let me fix that. Let me do this in time when I'm going to do that. So her higher self began to organize this, and everyone's higher self begins to organize. That's how it plays out, and that's where the liberation is anchored into this reality by people doing that. And I was briefed on that, and what it is that since the timeline, the star contract, which literally looks like, just like Patty said, I was shown it looks like a little disc, and you can find this on the internet if you look hard enough. They showed me it looks like a little disc with star dots on it, and I didn't know what it was, and they gave it to Patty, and she stared at it for probably about 15-20 minutes, and it was dilated time, so it goes 2 seconds go by, but if you paid attention, there was 15-20 minutes dilated. Nothing takes more than a second, and we were there for probably a few hundred years throughout all the integral experiences all together, and it took a few minutes. Very strange how it works. But people can't do that unless they have a chip or a very high level of capacity because it kills a person after the first 2 weeks. That's about the max you can do on an organic structure. But the idea is that, and then she held it up a certain way and said, look, if the sun's going to land over there at a certain point, at a certain time of the year, it's going to shift, and you're going to go over here, and you're going to see it's going to line up, and the variance between that is pointing between these stars. It's literally giving you a thumbs up saying, this is where we're from. And apparently it was a star map lining up to the supposed angle of the race, which in my terms is a dimensional barrier, if you will, of a frequency. It's literally like the frequency on a computer system of who they made the contract with. And so, and as well, that contract, it was actually to say, we won't let anybody hurt these humans. We'll take control and we'll bring them up to speed and get them cosmically intelligent and aware and ready for the coming age and so on and so forth. And they just started raping everybody about, 9,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, our time, but it's multiple versions of time. And so that's also why they say, well, load up on the karma, let's, kill a whole village real quick, because we don't want to know what happens when you piss off an extra-dimensional civilization. Which,
bring the Black Plague, kill.
Right, and so that's all that really I can put forth right now without saying too much and rambling on forever. But the contracts are delinquent; they are not in effect. But because someone has to say that, someone has to say these are broken.
Can I touch upon that?
Yes, they could have said it beforehand. but then you would really have to go up against the system. Now, technically, they do not have any legal right to do it in cosmic terms. And because these systems are being brought, because Karen and her work and the others, there's another fellow, I don't know his name, I can't remember it, but it's something called a Christian remedy, where the true creator is the only one who owns this place and can say anything in terms of that, and the children of God are the true inheritors of this land, and that is what is the talk of all this liberation account, or the funds of, I can't remember the words, and the goal is, the idea is that that's not real.
Collateral
right.
accounts.
The reality of that is that it's already over. It's ended. So there's no such thing as money. It's not real money. There's no reason to get real money. It's like saying, you're free. Go on, leave this prison planet, have fun. And somebody saying, but can we get more porridge? If we're free, you can give us all the porridge you got, right? That doesn't make any sense. But people are
can I touch upon something before I forget, if you have the moment, just
hold on
finish up.
1 second. The idea is that the collateral, the liberation, the Strawman, it was ended by a large mass operation, and all people have to do is access that by accepting it and stating it and giving their consent to themselves and taking it from the others. So go ahead.
Yeah, and saying I do not consent. What I wanted to say was that the last week of June, early into July of this year, I heard bell ring etherically, and somebody was talking to me about liberty had to be restored to the Republic, and I was like, the Republic can't be restored until the bell rings. And, through remote viewing and all that, we found that the bell was hidden under a fountain in Philadelphia, the real bell, because it was switched out at the last minute because two were made. One was a faulty one by the Bell Foundry, and a redcoat had cracked it, so it did not ring in the proper octave, and it all has to do with frequency. So we were, long story short, we were able to get the real bell to ring on the 4th of July, a few minutes right before midnight.
That was exactly what I was told. That there are all these safeguard systems set up around the planet, and it's all about frequency harmonics of basically the same thing as the soul trap net, only, like I said before, it works in the opposite, to restore, to maintain a stabilized tether to the organic, and ensure that the whole system will not be lost if somebody gets the wise idea later on to try and take over the entire universe using dark energy, which would obviously go wrong and threaten to destroy everything. And so there are these systems that are capable of tethering to natural, basically protective timelines, and these like safety activation systems that are built into the planet. Apparently, they're built into the mind of whatever this plane is. They're like security computer systems, but that their consciousness relative, meaning the people have to be at a specific frequency in order of sentience in order for them to activate.
To understand it and to protect it. I remember that I was a young soldier in that lifetime, and that I was keeping keeping an eye out for any of the redcoats, and I had a lantern, and I just remember it just seemed so vivid, and I was keeping an eye out because they were carrying the bell to a new location for it to be hidden, and the other bell that was put in its place obviously had that crack because it was poorly tempered and it did not ring at the appropriate octave. And so whenever I hear that song, Let Freedom Ring, it always felt wrong to me because freedom did not really ever ring until this past July 4th.
Right, and to put it in a bit of perspective, the other time, okay, so a few years back, within a couple hundred years, that was not low technology and lanterns. The technology they used was on par with what we would call a Star Trek type existence, and it's all simply been removed from the timeline, from the surface level reality.
Yeah, it was probably screen overlay. Who knows?
Yep. It was not just horse poop and taverns and cottages. We were in a high level existence, and in the same sense, thousands of years ago was not thousands of years ago, but merely hundreds of years ago, and that was the stretch of time because time dilates naturally, and we're in a dilation field, basically functioning like an illusion.
So this is why time now is being called the quickening, because it's beginning to accelerate to a certain point where a year is not exactly a year anymore, or an hour is not exactly an hour anymore.
Right.
Interesting.
And I hope my computer didn't just freeze, but something just messed up. Oh my gosh, it's frozen. Oh, is it? Something's happening. Oh, so much for that. Oh, no, there it goes. Nope, no it isn't. I don't know what it's doing. I don't really know what it's doing right now. And there goes the internet.
It's in a parallel timeline.
Wait, so time is accelerating. I want to say Stan Deo. He was a person designated for what's going on, and he describes some of these systems and how the actual time functions in the universe, where what we call time is not what was actually going on, where you have a kind of field. For instance, towards the so-called Big Bang, time could have moved because energy was more compacted and there was less distance between atoms or spaces. You could say that time occurred faster because the speed of light was relatively at a higher rate, or in this sense, a lower perception.
But wasn't that when they went back to the beginning and created their own Big Bang, so to speak?
Yes, and, sorry, I'm taking notes. How do you spell his name? And then, speed of light. Okay, so basically, the artificial Big Bang was the creation. This is what they told me. And I had trouble believing stuff. I had trouble believing the Freedom Bell thing. Other stuff I'm fine with. Interdimensional pirates and, whatever. Well, I've also experienced, cloning. Well, sure, I was in a clone half the time. This time, by the way, was in the original body because I had to drive to a facility, and there were two events in the past few years. I'm not going to say dates. That gets a little weird with telling when that went on, because then somebody can go back and play around.
Right.
Although it's supposedly, again, we're healing. Basically, I had to drive to a facility where this would play out. And these are daytime call-ups where you're in your body. So it was very strange. But I didn't wake up on a couch. I had to drive back, and I almost couldn't drive. And so what happened, and there was also designated witnesses, which is apparently how this is done. Not the witnesses of the ancient terminology. That's a different play out, and it occurs differently. But
isn't there something called timeline censorship, where you go in once and you can't go back to the same timeline time? Otherwise, it could create like a collapse within the fabric of time itself.
Right. So you can't go back. You can go back to the past, and you do that once. And now you can't go back farther than that time, because you'll overlay the time that you just already went back. In the universe, being a very delicate, consciousness-based system, basically, they say, it's like somebody made a crappy server system, and we're on it. They paid like $20 for it. And so basically it gets confused easy, and what happens when you're a computer, like mine almost did, what I have to do, close out the operation, close the program. So if we do that too much, it cancels our timeline and cuts us off, and we basically get erased. And so,
well, it's happened in other timelines where the Montauk Project, they messed around too much with going to different places and throughout history, and I heard that in other time streams that it had collapsed.
Right. Andrew Basago can talk about that, and a lot of people, won't sit there and I'll just put that there. I briefed on everybody. Silk F also will talk about timeline control groups. She says some comments in my on my YouTube. She has some videos. They're a little off the wall, but her information is relative. It's all timeline control groups. And the censorship is for a variety of reasons, but it's mainly to stop the collapse and that the system just look into...
But I'm talking about my own experiences, so I just wanted to verify if there's anybody else who has seen this or who's had or who has been told this, if you know what I mean.
Of course, and people will. There's a specific number, but eventually it will be everybody because that's how we get from here back to where we're going. It's all timeline control groups. Timeline censorship, something Donald Marshall said that if a person's in the overlay that is used to perform some of these false flag recordings where they insert a person into time and record that, and it looks fake because there's like these false flags, and it's like nobody's reacting the way you would expect a person to react. They're basically actors, but it's meaning they're inserted into time. And he mentioned that if a person in one of those extended temporal states, basically an alternate dimension, there's a certain word they said, basically an extended state, if they bump into and therefore disrupt the trajectory, the natural script or functioning of the timeline, essentially the time scale, or basically the script of that person that they're running on, if there's a human that's in the real time and there's this operative in that overlay, then that human transforms into a zombie that will not stop until they devour the person who bumped into them. The universe basically hijacks
in the assassination of Kennedy?
What was that?
Like in the assassination of Kennedy?
Not quite. That was actually something different. More or less, it was a form of street theater, and although that did alter time, but this is literally...
It slowed down time for a while.
Apparently everything is to slow down time, because we'd already be there by now, and technically we're already there, we're just stuck in the past. In an etheric bubble, if you will, distortion field. But it is actually like a zombie. They demonstrated it. The fellows, the Jovian, should I say that word? The jovial fellows in the projects that run this, and they were demonstrating. And I actually requested. I said, "All right, show me." So if you bump into somebody, they in this extended state, they get agent smithed by the universe, which has a control system, which is often what we call demons. We call it demons. That's the universe trying to fix the timeline. And so basically that thing turns a shade of gray, as if all the life was zapped out of them. They lose their mind, and there's no aspect of any type of person left, and they will not stop until they grab a hold physically of the individual who bumped into them, because they smell it apparently like a specific frequency. Look into, what was it?
Yes, it's an auric smell, and I tell people who've been through the programs, like, they have specific auric smell.
Right, look into Paranoid Times. They told me this was how we're going to release some information, just like Rudolph of Germany, who is another individual, which I've been briefed on. I met all of these, everyone, I don't know. I didn't even explain what happens when they unlock a person and bring them through time, but maybe that will happen in another timeline, if you will. But the idea...
When they bring them through time, I think I got brought out of time into this time.
Well, we did.
All I remember was 1954, and all of a sudden I'm in 84. But when I was a teenager, actually a preteen, I would tell kids in my class, I'm an alien from the future, and I meant it. I was serious.
Right, you're just being honest. And I meant the awakening when they show you all of time, and it's basically you know everything. It sounds funky. Well, thanks. But the idea is, so I said prove it, and the being apparently does not stop. They said they used basically like megaton-capable warhead shields, and somehow the being figures out a way to get through it. It turns into a dimensional a gateway for the power of the universe to step through into what is called a demonic format, and it tries to destroy the agent, the observer agent, which integrated the effect that disrupted the timeline. It has a timeline censorship. That's actually a it's not safeguard. It's a distortion effect, and then so the censorship team is to stop that from happening. Otherwise, we would have had a zombie awakening by now. And in various versions of it, that's what happened. And the timelines basically collapsed, and everybody kind of goes into saying there's a satanic awakening, and there's the era of the days of darkness, and everybody's ripping each other apart in the streets, and so on and so forth. These are the Armageddon overlays of previous fallen timelines where everything basically went to shit very quickly. And before that, Nazis won. Germany won. This is why I said it's kind of complicated as far as not surrendering for Nazis.
I know we did
the Nazis
win,
won, and they had to...
because of the Montauk Project, it was necessary evil because they went and gave plutonium for the Americans, and they also gave other inventions where as the Americans were able to beat the Nazis and their Foo Fighters and all that other exotic technology that they had time travelers, and Andy Perro was one of the time travelers from the 80s who went to the 40s to give them all these plans.
He was an operative a little bit before me.
Yes.
He was always bigger and older than me, and I'm relatively not too big anyway, but I was a child when he was active, and I was active as a child, but there's weird time delay things, it's weird, ripples of time. And you were just being honest with you saying what you said as a child, although maybe different wording, but they described to me that they won the war, and it instigated a time war that resulted in destroying the universe. And so they had to go back in time and convince themselves to give up and surrender to the Americans. So themselves said, "Go F yourself."
But they didn't surrender. It was
Well, themselves said, "Go F yourself."
The elites were the inner circle were they had an agreement to go elsewhere and to live out their lives and so forth, but there were some insidious characters who always wanted the rise of the Fourth Reich, and you saw that through Paperclip, and the real coup happened after '63, and then when they shot Reagan in the '80s, that cemented the coup of the Nazis in this country.
Right, and these are all overlays because we're basically in a tether or a de-tethered zone where all of this is being programmed, and they're planning everything out from another time. Basically, these are time operations. We're in, and the goal is to get out of that. But yeah, so I'll save what I was saying for another talk because it's a little heavy. Okay, maybe so they had to take out their former selves and replace them. Check out Rick and Morty, where you can do whatever you want and jump to a timeline where nobody knows. They had to basically...
Yeah, like Rudolf Hess and Himmler supposedly committed suicide with the cyanide capsule, but for some reason he still was running around. And Pigline and all of those other characters, I don't even like saying their names anymore.
Well, they're on the path to harmonization, I'll just say that. Because, you know...
To harmonization?
They helped me understand what's going on here. I wouldn't be here informing you. Although, I'll just say, if anybody...
Himmler hated me. He wanted to destroy me. But somebody said, no, she has the Templari Codex in her DNA. You can't do that. Right.
Apparently they all want to... Not they all want to do that. So, I'm being very open-hearted, and that's a terrible thing for me to say because of certain things that have gone on. I'm not going to blame. I'm pretty sure they just killed me in a previous timeline, and another. But in other words, worse things have happened by other individuals that I'm not going to name here, and I still actually don't even hate them or have any pain towards them because that, by the way, that feeds them and gives them the power to be the king ruling over your soul. Or the other one. And
I know what you mean.
But as well...
Say no more.
Right. And so, it's just how it works, and we don't... I'm not going to go deeper into it, but everything is changing, and nobody really knows what's going to happen next, and in a good way this time. But, yeah, check out Silk and Paranoid Times and Rudolph, and Awakening is when they showed all of time, and therefore... I've seen this conversation before. They call it second sight. Basically all the operatives go through it because all the elite gave it to themselves. So they're like cheating 100% of the time. There's no way to not cheat now. They know everything. They don't have to do anything to stay on track. Which is, for me, it takes all the fun out, which is why I kind of opted for a partial version, meaning I saw everything and now I have just what I need to know when I need to know it, instead of just being able to play around and do anything. Because if you know everything, you can drive a car 100 miles an hour, and if you know how it's going to go, you can close your eyes and make every correct turn.
Well, how were you selected to get that information?
Beats me. I've been on a lot of operations. I was drawn into this when I was 9. I have memories of thousands of years worth of experience on Earth, and I don't want to kill everyone and anything just because I'm kind of mad, but I know that some people require a very stern awakening, and I don't give an F about people who want to mess around and play with people or pretend that we're not strong enough and this can't be happening. I don't give a damn. I'll watch you do something that you don't want to do, whatever, not starve to death or hang off the end of a cliff, but I'll play the role where I can provide this information and assist in the liberation of humanity before I allow the people who want to sit there and just play these mind games, and I'll do that until the end of time. I'll do it until they become zombies. I'll do it until they don't exist anymore, because that's not going to happen.
I understand, but don't feed the wolf.
Oh, that wolf he's running away.
Okay.
The wolf that thinks they're getting off on that, they get handled, and that's how that works, and I've seen it. And it's fine, but I'm not being mean, so wake up, guys. This is a message of love, because handing ourselves over to the BS mind control program, it does not stop. It lasts for millions of years. It is time to wake up. It is time to take control and stop letting them make people fight and lollygag over this BS. It has nothing to do. It's a program. That's all I want to say about that. What else did you want to say? I might even remove that from the recording, honestly.
It's okay. I felt that it came from somewhere within that was really needed to come out. I can sympathize with that, but
maybe. I feel some people are going to be like, there it goes again, being mad and angry and blah, blah, blah. Whatever.
Why do you care what people think?
Well, there you go. Because I know that if they continue on a path where they're dissolving into angst and
okay, but my question to you was, what made you decide to converse with me and tell me these things? Was it something internal? Was it something external that made you feel like, okay, she's all right, so to speak? I can communicate certain things to her, test the water, see how much she knows, and let's compare notes.
I can read it within the first few seconds. It's part of the program. Look, it's a mind control entrainment weirdo program, but it gives us superpowers and turns us into immortal superhumans. There. So be it. And the point is, what are people going to do with it?
No, but I just, it's just, I guess, since I'm having this conversation with you, I guess it was out of curiosity.
You're here for the liberation. I can tell you are here to help. You're not here to gain power and then abuse people.
No. So my question is, how can I help people?
The strange thing is,
how can I help some more? Yeah.
Nothing happens on the surface. Everything that happens is interdimensional. The only thing we do is say, wake up, everybody. this is going on. That's it. We're a mental temporal anchor for knowledge-based progression, which changes the timeline.
How can I save Angelo without being killed? I danced around that question. But
they've all connect themselves into a... it is an agreement that they'll all go down and that none of them can give up, otherwise they get taken out. Part of that is the agreement. That's why I mentioned the reprobate clause and the rehabilitation and all of that, because it has to be figured out what to do in some way in that situation. The old trick is, come, let us go down and make man in our image. So these fallen groups decided to make a contract where they're not going to give up and they're going to do whatever it takes to maintain power no matter what. But as a result, that means when they finally get in trouble or it is ended, that means they're going to get a whooping equally. Nobody's going to get out. Nobody's going to get away. But they're all, until then, they can do anything they want. Nobody can, there's no law, basically. The law is do what you want. And so now, what about those who didn't want to do that and they wanted to get free? And this whole time they just wanted to get out. Or what about those who did a lot of bad stuff, but halfway through their intuition and their compassion woke up and their conscience returned? How can we restore them? How can we solve this? How can we influence the situation if they're all also a part of a same computational, technological hive mind system? What can be done? So it's being handled by
turn off the computational hive mind system.
Basically.
Or will that cause them to die?
Until they're de-tethered, yes. Because I said the same thing. And apparently there are civilizations tethered through that timeline that are, therefore, slaves. And they're hostages. And so you shut off their system that gives them their power, you're killing an entire civilization. Therefore, we have the extraction methods. The extraction rendezvous points in time where through a fifth-dimensional barrier outside of the probabilities that anybody can access through a computer system or through the mind, but it must be accessed through a spiritual connection point. You have a bridge that's connecting one civilization to the next, and the broken civilization is passing through that dimensional barrier, a gap, a void in time-space, and moving into a the solved situation, the timeline where it doesn't exist. And the other part is I probably will remove those aspects because, like they say, we don't negotiate with terrorists. We're not supposed to interact with people who want to drain the energy, and that means even acknowledging them, because that gives them not only a further vindication where now I'm responding, but it allows them to latch on and produce a continued effect, because even if you bow down and give them hugs all across their body, no sexuality thing there, they're going to stand up and punch a person in their face because that's what they want. They don't want reason, they want to fight. And so it's just not to interact and to move on and keep going. And the funny thing is, you do that enough, you get a crowd of zombies running after you going, way, and then it's obvious what's going on. Instead of
gang stalking.
Well, there you go.
Well, so me having having affection towards somebody who's really trapped, enveloped in that whole scheme is actually a power play for them to hold me from re-evolving into my true self.
Yes and no. When you get to the truth, you're going to love everybody, but you'll know how to put that area there in its place. Before then, Eve Lorgan, I was briefed on Eve Lorgan. I met her before in the bases.
Who? I'm sorry?
Eve Lorgan.
Oh,
she doesn't support a lot of me talking about this technological stuff, but the point is, the truth is that we have to understand what's going on to a degree. I often go above and beyond, and that's possibly going to do a problem. It's going to be a bit more of a problem than it is providing a solution. But the idea, so they gave it to me, and they give a drug, and then they give an electronic...
Oh, yeah. Lots of drugs.
Well, and then they give an electronic entrainment protocol, and then basically a beam rearranges the neurons. And now, where there was a negative orientation in a person who was abusive, it's the opposite. As much as they were abusive, now they're gorgeous. And they're full of power.
And charming.
And charming. It turns it into vampiric charm. It's exactly the word.
Sociopath.
It's like they invented that word and the idea of the vampire, because technically, what am I saying? They did.
Charm, enchanted,
it's an
enchanting, yeah.
And so we have to be aware where that's happening, because they're going to do that to the world, and everybody's going to be like, oh, hail the masterminds. And but that's the false version, and apparently that's what happened in past, whereas everything kind of collapsed relatively quickly. But
in Atlantis or ancient Rome?
Oh, so here's the
Take
other
your
one.
pick.
So, well, there you go. Egypt, Atlantis, ancient Rome. Which one is which? So here's the other one that not only is giving new life a legal term, the Rebirth, where our Strawman is destroyed, and in that sense we're legally dead right now, and if we kill the Strawman, we're coming back to life because we're regaining our sovereignty, which is another legal term. And so basically what was told to me, which again, like the bell I had where I was saying this a few minutes ago, or actually more than that, it was just hard to believe that the false overlay for the artificial dimension began in Rome, which was somewhere near 500 to 600 years ago, real time, and it was when they lined up their electronic equipment just right in Rome, and they created an implosion field that collapsed the actual universe and popped up in an inversion artificial dimension that we call this universe, aka this Earth, this timeline now. And the Big Bang, technically, for this artificial inversion one where it went down and then expanded back out the other side like a balloon deflating and then moving through itself and coming out backwards, turned inside out, was a few hundred years ago. Which is the strangest thing.
So,
but we're getting reverberations
that,
all the time.
But that would explain why Octavia the Great had the capacity to, I don't know if she was looking through a well of water or what. She was looking into the future, and she was influencing people in our current timeline,
right,
or in our current time. And we had to close off that, rift in time that she had, I don't know if she'd opened it or if it was just there, but she had accessed it.
Well, it creates distortions because there's a loopback effect if the future is influenced or more or less influences the past. And even though she was altering the future, the fact that the future was sent back to the past through her consciousness to see what was taking place, it creates a loop where it does not work.
Certain inner earthers were helping her. That's all I have to say. Who look human.
Right, and there was so basically the Dogon tribe have a story of the Nomos who came in and gave them information about the heavens and basically interdimensional knowledge. And then they opened up a puddle of water and dove into it and disappeared. And so some say they dove into the water, blah, blah, blah. So they used portal travel. Same thing. And so the idea is that some of these so-called inter-Earths became infected by these AI systems, and they're really more of interdimensionals or intertime.
Yes.
And in that sense, where they were supposed to step in and say, you guys, something bad's happening, let's work together and solve this, they just sat back and watched the whole time while the universe basically imploded. So they're getting revoked as guardians or custodians, and they're being stepped down a tier. And this is also related to the ancient texts. Some of the texts in the Bible is not two bulls. It is the ancient texts, basically the scriptures. And sure enough, more noises are going off in my room. And
well, the Ashanta snakes were supposed to be some sort of caretakers for humanity, but they became drunk with power, and they're no longer, I don't know if they were taken off planet, or I don't know what you want to call it, out interdimensionally to go back and get recalibrated, is what I heard.
Right. It has to do a little bit with your crystal bath or something like that, because there are organic technologies that are capable of more or less smoothing out the ripples in time. and that includes the technological or the temporal, body of the person, because your DNA, your temporal body, it enables access to time. If the DNA is altered, that's how they created an artificial timeline.
I felt it got altered when interacting with that certain person whose eyes turned black and were throbbing, and there was a guy in the hotel. I don't know if he was the guy that carries the luggage or a waiter, but he was like, "Excuse me, ma'am, you cannot go in there." And I just went right past him. I disregarded him. I knew I had to do this.
Right. And so the eyes can act as a scalar projection system and transfer energy or frequencies, and that is some ways of infection and even possession and telepathy, or a love aspect, which is why some of these interdimensionals cannot be looked at directly because they will produce that effect and mind control the individual, and they basically have a very powerful scalar telepathy system.
Well, how do you think I felt for the Führer?
Well, in a way, there you go. And everybody, can be loved, so it doesn't have to be. But again, there's the love bite. Read up on that with Eve Lorgan. She doesn't go deeply into these technical aspects or direct experiences, but she is one who decodes these systems and basically calls them out and presents them to the public to say, hey, this is probably going on. At least this is what it looks like, and blah blah blah.
I also have to say there was a lot of black magic involved, and he was quite he was trained quite well in the Hadar guards, and I remember I was collecting a soul shard. In this current life, I went back and collected a soul shard from the Motherhood, a Darkness castle that had been left there, and I don't know how you feel about collecting soul shards and cleansing them before you integrate them into yourself, because it is a part of you, but it's something so traumatic that a piece of your soul gets shattered. So I've gone back to a few places in time to collect them and purify them the best I can.
Right. That is apparently part of this whole process where humanity, moving through this technological system that kind of acts as a prism and spares, not a prison, but a prism, and splays or splices the energy into multiple streams, it created the parallels, which is not how we're supposed to be. It created multiple parallels, 9 dimensional, basically, octave separation of what was once a whole streaming experience. And so what has to happen is all the shards of the fragments of energy must be brought back together and pieced together for the entire soul of humanity to heal itself. And when that occurs, the broken timeline cannot exist because all the energy is extracted out of the false light matrix, which is literally trapping the energy in a kind of dimensional hall of mirrors.
So, if they have a part of you, then they can control you in some sort of way. That's very black magic.
It is all based upon magic, and not a lot of people talk about it. I don't talk about it too much, but it's all based on
magic with the K, yeah.
And it's just a form of technical and dimensional psychology. And everything is conscious, everything is magic in a way. But basically, if there is a fragmentation of your energy, what happens? If there's a fragmentation of your memory and your personality, what happens? There is less of you now focused there in one of them or all of them because they're separated, and so the power is lessened. So, and as well, if this is a soul, what is a soul shard to a person who's technological? Well, now this soul shard creates timelines. If I position it just the right way, like a time crystal, which they've begun inventing, and they showed me that before it came out in the media within the past year, that it anchors through time. It's like a circuit that moves transdimensionally through time, and in that way you can not beam out colors, but you can beam out timelines, and like a prism of some sort or a charge from a piezoelectric crystal. you have the soul shards, and so they can use these to anchor timelines. And as well, this means that a person will be unaware of their true power, or at least their full sentience, until they regain the shards. And what they do to the crystal will allow them to control the whole like a holographic fractal piece, and basically they can kind of create soul clones, or mental clones, if you will, and reorganize a person's mind through basically beaming energy into the shard, which it happens the same concept as creating a clone and then doing something to the clone, which is also, ironically, the same concept as creating a virtual simulation that is applied down to the molecule and then doing something to the simulation. Apparently the universe doesn't see the difference between them, just like your unconscious mind doesn't see the difference between a video game and news or real life.
And that's why they entrain kids to play those shooter video games, so they could have future soldiers.
Right. It is a consciousness central universe, and so some part of the cosmic mind is within the players of that video game feeling and simulating the death. And so it's kind of sad to look at it that way.
There was one thing that I did want to share and touch upon. You were talking about, well, we were talking about soul shards and everything like that. I just wanted to say that in, I believe, November 2014 was when the Bataclan attack occurred. Am I correct on that? Because I'm not too good with specific, times or dates, but I remember I was out for at least 12 hours asleep, supposedly, and but I remember that I was kidnapped and I was put on a military, it was a small plane, it was not commercial, and I had a woman with Asian features on one side and soldiers in fatigues on the other side, and I had been drugged, and I arrived at Camp Shaw, I think it's in South Carolina, and I ran up to a woman with a white lab coat and I said, "Help, I'm being kidnapped, I'm being kidnapped." And she said to me, "This isn't you. This is an aspect of you." And that's the only answer she gave me. And then, all I remember was, going into this tube thing, and all of a sudden I was in an airport, and I was a man, and I was in France, but I don't remember anything else, but I put two and two together, and I was like, holy crap, I hope I was not part of the Bataclan false flag, but it took me a long time to really come to terms with that. Because when I came back, I felt like my body was in pain. I felt like my head was on fire. I felt like parts of my hair had been singed, and it was such an odd experience. It was part real, and it was part something else.
Right, possibly some aspect dimensional overlay and inserted memory mixed with actual operation to cover up what kind of went on. Or simply all real with strange blips between segments. And I've had plenty of experiences like that as far as getting out of the scenario, running down a hall and saying, where am I? Let me out of here, and then just being like basically playing it off with like some type of nonchalant response. And a lot of times they do that to see what the person's going to do, which is interesting, kind of.
Yeah.
But, basically, I don't really go into that, basically these operations, and I don't have too much information on that specific event that you're talking about.
I'm just sharing my own experiences,
Okay. Well,
I know that yours are your own, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing it, that's okay with me. I decided to share that since we were talking about soul shards and all that stuff.
right, and I don't have too much about that, but one aspect of this is that operatives are used, and you wouldn't really think it a lot, in what are basically modern-day warfare.
Oh, yeah, I know I've been utilized without my consent. I would never hurt another person, and it was really hard for some time. I had a bit of depression after that to think that could it have been possible that they utilized me. And I remember going to a base in South Carolina, and I was there for a few weeks, and it was just so odd. But then again, everything having to do with this is odd.
To some, yeah. Because I try and get that vibe from them, like, aren't you weirded out? And it's like, that happens earlier on. We're not telling you everything. If we told you everything, you die. You can't handle it. So.
Well, I'm saying odd to people hearing this. I mean,
I try not to think about that.
Oh, I don't mean to be degrading or anything like that.
You're not at all.
It's just so hard to explain, and I don't want to. It's hard to. I just want to be free, and I know we all want to be free, and how to break through this is the key. And that's the ultimate solution I'm trying to look for.
Yep. And I think all of this is part of the path for that. Basically linking up and eventually pulling all of the aspects of ourselves. It was literally said that there's basically a higher dimensional checkpoint that we have to access as a civilization, and that in that checkpoint our memories exist, and in that way we have to gather all of our fragmented selves and bring them back into one reality, because that's the reality that doesn't collapse. Meanwhile, if all of them are spread out, they all collapse. But if all of them are back in the one combined reality, then the others will fall away. And we could say, well, maybe we want to be, even then it doesn't make sense to say, well, what if we're on a bad timeline that we all meet up on, and they're like, nah, we got them, we won, now they're in the timeline that we want. The truth is, there is no bad timeline if we're all back together, all our soul fragments and all the original, crew of humanity or team. And I know original is not, I said before it doesn't make sense, but that's just to make it easy to understand. That's the one where none of this
the
can be...
original created ones. Am I correct?
Yeah, and created by a divine act.
A divine, that's what I meant. The original organic created ones.
Right, and a divine act of love instead of somebody trying to make super soldiers.
Yeah.
Because that goes back to the whole fallen and the artificials who are more or less scared. And as I was saying before, the reprobate, all of that, well, the idea is that there is the one true creator, and they can, I don't think I mentioned this, I think I forgot, is that they can give new life. That is the other meaning of rebirth, from ending the system, ending the corporate law, commercial rule over the false system that is a contractual agreement to give all of our soul energy away to what is commonly deemed the Satan being. It is it's actually an entity, an interdimensional overlord, but that as well, those who turn away, even though they have done wrong, and with their heart repent or request forgiveness and truly forgive themselves, can be given new life by the one true creator, and then they are made anew. And even if they came out of a dimensional rift where only darkness works and they can only see death and delusion, they're given a new chance, a new life, and they can live in the healed timeline. But they have to actually want that. And that's where the intentions are the level that will be read, and that is where it is handled beyond our surface level. Nobody's going to be fighting hand-to-hand or with technology in this timeline from the civilization level, because we're not supposed to do that. We don't have the right. We're not allowed. If anybody fights, it's a breach of the law.
It's my intent to return to the organic timeline, and over the years and over time, I've learned to forgive myself, and it's time to move forward, so to speak. Whatever you want to translate that as, to move ahead after learning what I've learned and experience what I've experienced. The dark side is not for me, and I don't even know how I got caught up in all of that. I mean, why would I incarnate as Eva Braun?
It's
to marry one of the Antichrists.
It's a strange situation. I sometimes wonder as well, but with you being where you are now, okay, well that means that you didn't ask for that, even if you did, because you didn't know, and so there's basically deception. And I'll go ahead and say something similar, where my intent is to forgive and those who have done wrong and return to the organic timeline, move forward into healing and wholeness, and assist in the liberation of humanity, and assist in those who have done wrong into becoming righteous in the context of the one true creator and the true universe, and in that sense coming into their own power and liberating from the AI system that more or less is imprisoning the organic and even the inorganic.
Exactly. It feels so empowering to be free of the influence, of the heavy influence behind the gilded cages which I was in. And yes, I still do get certain attacks, like I said, hospitalization 2 weeks ago, twice actually, and it was just it's hard, it's not easy, but I'm not going to turn around and say, okay, you win. That's not going to happen.
And it's also not true, because they can never actually win, and people can never actually be defeated. So we can't actually give up. It doesn't do anything. It just makes everything kind of crappy for a while.
Yeah, like going thousands of dollars to hospitals and all. But it's all an illusion. The money is an illusion. It's all a big scheme.
It's just experience, and it's all kept up in these dimensional realms. And so whatever we want to experience is what happens. It doesn't cost money. It just costs the power of intent. And again,
well, I didn't plan on experiencing that. I mean, I think it was to deter me from helping with the Liberty Bell situation.
Right.
Because it happened within that time.
Which is the strange way time works.
Yeah, it's how they try to deter people from doing positive things.
Indeed. We all have a choice.
Indeed. So, on that note, I think I've said what I had to say. Do you know, by any chance?
I do not know, but in terms of the family that you mentioned being connected with, I know it's basically one big cloning operation. And they're trying to settle it down.
We all got transplanted. You see, my parents from the 1940s are my parents today.
Right. And that's basically how it's playing out. And there's a motion for change, but again, I might even cut out what I said previously, which is going to be a hell of a recording editing job about the intentions of certain military factions because, again, ongoing and roles and identities is basically, it's operation security. And so that's just what I said about a certain situation. But basically, yeah, everybody's trying to work towards disclosure.
Okay. Well, yeah.
And I don't know specifically about your question, but I don't think it would be too unlikely because I've had my own various situations, and although I can't say that they're the happiest situations as far as how they seemingly end up. Although in the end, everybody can be, the DNA carries the information of all the possibilities, so all family can be brought out through the DNA as long as one person of the bloodline survives the shift with their memory intact. And that is also the second death, like you said, and the rebirth of those who are, so this is what I forgot to say, whereas those who survive but cannot keep their memory intact because of a dimensional shift, which is also what Dan Winter talks about with the implosion ratio and the fire letters and the DNA and the contraction, infinite, and perfect dimensional expansion. He doesn't mention it in this way, but it means if we go through that and our DNA is not active and we are not in a geometrically sound format for our consciousness, when we go to the other side, the information that we try to carry through, it'll be like a dog who has a big branch in his or her mouth, and they try and go into a doorway, and they get
a doorway, yeah.
And so it's the same thing that our ego doesn't fit through that. We have to transfer ourself into our soul and our spirit, and that's difficult in body consciousness because it's namely impossible. And so the idea is not everyone will instantly be destroyed. It's the fact that everyone has a counterpart in that healed civilization because we're there now in a dream time, alternate dimension, literally experiencing this as a type of cosmic clone experience. But the idea is that those who wake up on the other side being reborn through the rebirth, they will forget everything, and like it's written, they'll be like babies again, and they will have to relearn how to talk and walk and how to do everything. And imagine the trauma of that if we've been there for thousands to thousands of years. It would be...
yeah.
The people, even though it's traumatizing, the people who wake up and go, "We made it," are going to be happier and better than the people who go, "We made what? What are you talking about?" And just completely blank-minded for anything. It would be like being born again in a not-so-fun way. It honestly wouldn't be like being born again. From their perspective, it would just be like 100% having Alzheimer's all of a sudden. In a situation where there's no disease. It wouldn't make sense. But again, that will be...
There would be no death either, correct?
Right. Well, that's the end of death, the end of time, the defeating of the binary infection parasitic code, where they said they uploaded a system that basically causes disease and death and gave themselves instant immortality through this technology, and it's all like a virtual system they created. I've said this before, and I'll probably say it again, and so people can check out other videos, but a very strange situation, that's what it is, and it's the end of days, the end of time, the end of death. The return to a whole existence. A front group and a real group, most people don't really understand what that means. A lot of people, even the operatives, is completely blacked out from all of the information and facing assimilation because another guy completely wants to destroy all Solar Warden and all the Liberation crew because he thinks they're of the devil. And so these are assimilation programs running, and most people, so most people didn't make it. Which means they're here, but they're not awake. They're like robotoids, if you will.
Heavily abducted as a child. A lot of strobe lights. Yeah, it happened to me.
Yeah, it's part of the soul magnet.
Yeah, so, I feel around me at the moment, and, I don't know if you can communicate or not, but, I think it sprung his attention when I began talking about that.
Well, it's a possibility. Especially as the airwaves are liberated, basically everybody's going to begin to have these types of experiences, which is again going to cause a lot of problems because people are going to say, "Oh, this is the work of the devil."
No, I'm beyond that.
Right. So, because that's all that's doing is just putting something bad over something that doesn't have to be bad.
Right, and that's primarily what the Catholic Church did, so you could avoid contacting your higher self or other benevolent beings. You had to use the Pope to intercede.
Right, or contact the best dead people you ever seen, your ancestors, where the rest of your soul information is contained, and all of the glory of the information that we don't have access to on this plane, our ancestry and our higher self.
Yeah, that's why I said I had to travel through the sun to visit my grandma.
Right.
She was on another planet.
Yep.
So, oh man, I just, I put some pictures in. I don't know if you can see them or not. These are actual pictures I've had to show some sort of proof that they've been watching me and so forth.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and a random email from a Yahoo address that said, "Hi, the old Chancellor." Come on, who's the old Chancellor?
Find it all kind of interesting, if you ask me.
Of course. I'm sorry, I have dry humor. What can you expect?
I like it. Works with me.
What is it that we have to do? I know I've asked that question, but...
It was all meant to be, it was all part of the liberation process that everyone would find each other and begin to synchronize. And this is relative to the highest intentions, but as well putting the seeds of our intentions and integrating that into this reality to make it basically stamped into this reality that that is what we are doing. And apparently there's a type of effect when we are in a close basically a close physical proximity to one another. That if we were all to get into the same place, that A, it would be very dangerous because they could take out everybody at once, but B, there would probably be some type of cosmic shield because that would be basically the future civilization.
Yeah, that's kind of why I felt it's inexplicable because I haven't had that ever happen before, but when I heard you talk, I felt something like light up in my brain. Almost electronic, and it was so weird.
Right, and another strange aspect is that one can't go back and alter the past in order to destroy the future that they came from. They're only going to reinforce that future. Therefore, that's why everything is being treated as an experiment where they can do whatever they want, because they know they cannot actually destroy the future that they come from, and it will only make people stronger, and this is connected to the time censorship where we can't go back to the same area, so if we go forward through the darkest portion, through this temporal loop situation, we'll never be able to actually go back to that darkness ever again, and will be literally an eternity of progression towards the Most High. And so it's playing out in that kind of scenario, but in that sense, we kind of have to get through this crazy situation, if you will, and I was informed that the worst is over. And I didn't believe that for 6 or 7 years, but now I kind of do, because even if a lot of bad stuff happens, and there's a lot of stuff I could see happening, it's not going to be as bad as it was. Just because I'm in a better position, and I think a lot of humanity is in a better position, because the last time we had a chance to awaken was right before 9/11. Which also is kind of foreboding.
That day was like groundhogs for me, because I was in New York, and I remember that I woke up at least once or twice, but at the same time. So it was like somebody was tinkering with time, because I remember waking up in one room, and then I remember I woke up in my own room. It was so weird.
Right, well that was largely an operation-based event. An operative-based event, excuse me. It was a time event. It was inserted.
Yes, to drift the timeline towards a more destructive path.
And it was also simultaneously inserted in a way that everyone would see it was false to wake people up. There's always a double effect to everything.
You mean the people who perished, or?
No, the people. Apparently, nobody perished. Except it's like a give or take kind of situation of how it's viewed. Basically, if the result is people wake up, then that gets disappeared from time, and it's as if nobody actually died, and they're sticking with that explanation. But
well, I've heard of children that have reincarnated and are old enough to say, I remember I worked in a tall building and I had to jump from because of the fire, and I saw my brains go splat on the street.
Right. Well, the idea is that if it was done to, it was so obvious that everybody sees it, and that's helping wake people up. And as well as drop the civilization into an inserted timeline. But as well, if the liberation is reached, then it gets erased from time, including the people who experienced it. It doesn't really make sense until you see how something like that happens. But just imagine if you have any of these Mandela effect memories where it was one way, but now it's the other way, or there are some memories of something there, but now it's not there, or there is something new, and you don't have any recollection of that ever being here. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Only it's gonna happen on a large scale, and we have to be prepared for it, which is one of the main things. The summing up of all that is basically it's already
like
happening.
Atlantis never sank.
Kind of. Well, basically, yeah. But it's more so about why it sank and who and more or less,
like
where.
Crashed the hydro suspension fields and they overloaded the crystal. I mean, there was more than one occasion where the catastrophe happened in the incarnations of Atlantis.
Right. It was explained to me that it was connected to the Lucifer Rebellion, and their technology, like our technology, controls the weather. However, it was controlled by the same field that is linked to their mind. So if their consciousness, if everybody rioted, they would, it would cause waves and storms. And
no, but in the golden age of Atlantis, it was controlled by these crystals, these tiny, tiny crystals called hydrosuspension fields. And I guess that they used their consciousness to destroy everything.
Well, that is the technology, and the rebellion was to take control and rule over what was otherwise a utopia, and it was a novel idea. It was the cat's meow back then, and now here we are dealing with. That's why I say these echoes, kind of like a correlation of pain echoes and civilization pain echoes. So this civilization is a pain echo of that disaster, and everyone since then has been that. But that's also why when it's healed, it all disappears, and this becomes a memory that we kind of wake up from in that higher dimensional civilization, and some people will not have any recollection.
That's why in Germany they were called Aryans. Aryan was I think it was an island once the big continent broke off. There was Aryan and Aug and other places like that.
Right. They described it to me as a type of dimensional Pangea. And apparently they're still tethered in time, and this is to connect the souls of those who would basically be dissolved into the abyss back into the organic timeline. Which is kind of nice, but it's also the reason that we're still here. Which means it's stressful. But it's like that so surgery with the aura, with the mind, okay, Earth is having temporal cosmic surgery for the past 10,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's done, it's all better. And it also can't die. It's not a mortal being. It's an immortal being. So, but then it's again that identity.
What happened to Melendez then?
Those are a bit different, where these might have been interdimensional overlays from a possible timeline that only exists if the organic remains separated for quote-unquote forever, which is impossible, meaning these are kind of like dimensional alternates that aren't grounded or tethered and can't actually be grafted into the original, but these are the attempts to graft it, which results in these endless wars and these time loops.
Patty was trying to bring in that planet from another parallel place and anchor it into this soul system.
Right. She said that.
Yeah, and and I don't know why exactly, but I know she was trying to do that.
They were telling me a little bit about it, and they said for some reason, I don't understand it, but they fear that. I think it's because the so-called overlords that they basically would be enslaved under in order to enslave everyone else are in that timeline or that so-called planet or dimension, and that they would become the slaves of the slave owners at that point. These elite, if you will. They wouldn't be top dog anymore. But as well, if everyone is liberated, then those overlords wouldn't have any power over humanity, and the chances are that they might not desire any such power because that's kind of like a human trait.
Yeah. Wow.
It was also described as a being to me. As
King.
As a consciousness collective.
Yeah. Yeah, and he came here and they took his powers, supposedly. Call it a he, but...
Right.
Okay, so, in closing, I feel that I've probably taken enough of your time, and I'm quite appreciative of it. We had a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
But thank you, too. And, you know, feel free to, if you need to talk or if you need to get anything off your chest, you can call me. You know, I'm here for y'all. I don't say y'all, but, you know.
It's funny. Sometimes I do. Yeah, thank you. Sorry if I rambled or yelled strange information that didn't quite make sense in your ear. But
no, it's understandable that it was coming from within you and that it's something that needed to be expressed. And that's how I took it as.
Okay.
Nothing personal.
Okay. Well, thank you. And
do you want to say something in closing in regards to the recording, or?
Just a few thanks yous. If you want to say something, you can go ahead and speak to whoever lasted for 3. And oh wow, that was almost 4 hours. Over 3.5 hours. Yeah, I appreciate this. This was beneficial for me. I think it's beneficial for the others. It's good to keep them. I don't really know what I'm saying anymore. Relative, so people can understand it. But I know that only people who really want to know are gonna be people who like these talks. I really can't say anything else. I enjoy it. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the listeners, and I appreciate you. And thank you.
You're absolutely welcome. It's my pleasure, and you have a pleasant night.
All
Take care, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
See ya.